everyone. Welcome to Tonight's Last Call. We're back here in the studio, hanging out with my good friends, Bob.
Hello.
And Mr. Aaron Smith.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to, we're back. We took a little bit of a hiatus, or I should say I took a little bit of a hiatus. Was in Vegas, came back, was busy at work. And so, you know, it was a nice little mini break. But yeah, so we're back. And of course, recently we've been getting into our studio that is pretty awesome and fun to be a part of. And so, yeah, so like this is where we hope to continue to bring you a lot more interesting games, but also conversations. And so, yeah, so the one thing that we really want to kind of discuss tonight is we're like, well, what should we talk about? And just as we're sort of trying to figure that out, Paizo drops a blog post about the Ranger, and it just seemed like it was kind of an interesting thing. It's not something that we have really talked about, and I thought that Ranger would be an interesting option because Bob, you have played.
Played is real loose.
You've played a few Rangers in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and very famously, I don't know if famously is the right word for this or not, I have said, you know, I don't think that the class is designed particularly well. So we can talk a little bit about.
Good thing they're remastering it.
It's a good thing that they're remastering that. Now, it remains to be seen. Will they actually fix it? You know, I don't know. I don't particularly think that they will, but you know, because one of the things I think that we can also talk about that kind of benefits this sort of environment is what would a remaster look like for us? You know,
I think London has it right. 2 bows. I want to be able to short bow, long bow anytime I want.
That's fair.
At the same time.
This class, I mean, you covered this in your history of the Ranger, but like...
No, I actually haven't done the history of the Ranger yet.
Oh, no?
No.
Oh, gee, well, that's a good one. You should do that.
I know.
It's a good segue into a tip goal or something.
Well, actually, we do have a tip goal that had been reached at the beginning of September, which was to do another a class deep dive. You know, we weren't 100% sure which one we were going to do, but you know, we can kind of tiptoe a little bit into the Ranger because
Ranger's history is fascinating and
sad,
kind of sad. Yeah,
right, exactly. So
this class, like in the earlier editions, and you know, I'm sure if Ben's in a chat, he'll know the specific references, but like, was this like wilderness warrior, like primary constitution based, right? But like a lot of hit points, very strong combatant. Eventually, some nature magic and stuff like that, but like a full on warrior. Like
but was
second edition
ranged? Always ranged?
No.
It could use bows, but it also used weapons. Like,
okay, I was just wondering.
In second edition, they broke out the classes by like kind of like meta classes, like warrior, rogues, or thieves. Maybe they call them.
Well, in second edition, it was rogues, of which there was the thief and the bard.
Right. And then whatever they did with the wizards,
mages, which were wizards and illusionists and specialists.
And the Ranger was a full-on warrior, so like attacked just as well as a fighter. Got all the proficiencies of fighter. I think they had slightly less armor, but then also got things like stealth skills and stuff like that. Very cool character, right? Very hardy character, right? Same hit points,
right? And it's very clear if you go back to the source. And it's a little wonky because there's certain weird elements of the Ranger, but it's very clear that the Ranger came from Tolkien. Right,
very Aragorn inspired with some.
That's what they're sort of talking about.
But the thing about Aragorn is there are many specific to Aragorn.
Yeah,
there are many things that Aragorn does in the thing which feel more like a paladin.
100%. That's what I was going to say. Like, it's not a direct comparison,
right? But I think that when you think of the Dunedain, as a group,
minus Aragorn,
when you think of the Rangers, you know, of the North, that was very clearly the inspiration because even in the concept, Rangers were kind of, I believe you had to be good alignment in first edition. I might be mistaken here, but I believe you had to be good aligned because they were very much inspired by the Dunedain. Yeah. They were this sort of like secret brotherhood that kept the lands of the people safe from orcs and trolls and stuff like that.
And importantly, formidable warriors.
Right.
Like not like these like light skirmish guys, but like straight up, you could straight up fight with these guys and they'd kick your ass.
Yeah. You know? And they got these massive bonuses to damage. against specifically the monsters of the wilds, orcs and goblins and trolls and giants, and that's what they were. That's what they did.
So sort of the hunt prey comes from.
Well, no. So this is no, because what ended up happening is at some point. Well, this is we talked about again, but the Ranger had two things that happened to it. Number one, in my opinion, was the publication of Dritz to Erden.
Yes, I don't want to blame R.A. Salvatore because
I'm on book 2, I think now.
The effed up part about the Dritz Ranger is the things that later got associated with the Ranger that came from Dritz had nothing to do with his Ranger classes. It was entirely his fighter training and Menzo Veranza.
Right.
And it's just like so dumb. Like the whole dual wielding thing, like Dritz could do that. Yeah, he did that as a fighter before he ever even became a Ranger.
Right.
Like it had nothing to do with being a Ranger.
It had nothing to do with being a Ranger. People saw, he was double slicing. They were like, oh shit, this is a pretty sweet, powerful feat. We should give it to Rangers. Like, no, they had nothing to do with it. Tangent. By the way,
I should be able to get a Black Panther from the Dark World or whatever he comes from.
Sure. Well, so we'll get to that. So just a side tangent, but when you first see Dritz to Erden, it is in the book The Crystal Shard, which came out before the Dark Elf trilogy. Now, in the chronology of the thing, Dark Elf trilogy comes first, right? So that's Homeland, Exile, and Sojourn. Because when he wrote Icewind Dale trilogy, it was this kind of cast of characters. You had Bruenor, you had Wolfgar, you had Canterbury, you had
Forgotten Realms Avengers, basically.
Forgotten Realms Avengers, but people really liked.
Bob's like, I like that series now. I'm gonna go read it.
No, I just finished book 2.
But people,
Icewind Dale.
Nice.
So Streams of Silver.
Yeah, that was the one where they went to his homeland.
Mithril Hall.
Yeah, Mithril Hall. Yeah,
it's a great book.
Yeah, it was actually pretty cool.
So
lots of cool, like, I can't get into that. I have to. He had to, like, test his memory basically with that stuff to get there.
Right.
It's great. Yeah, recall some knowledge.
Ooh.
So you get to this world where I was gonna say is like in the first book, Dritz wasn't really anything. He was a side character in a sense.
Yeah, he was designed to be like Wolfgar's like cohort.
Right. But one of the things, this is why this is
like the main character.
Right. But is he though? Not really.
If you're asking me, a young adult reader, a YA reader.
Sure.
When I read that book, Dritz was the.
Clearly Dritz is the character that stood out the most because he was kind of edgy.
Yeah.
And he was a loner.
Literally, even in book 2.
And
I'm pretty sure
there's a reason
like
Dritz got series after series after series.
There is, exactly. But one of the things that I loved, and this is why this is a tangent, is Dritz in the Dark Elf trilogy, right? He trains for 100 drow years or something like that to be like a warrior and a fighter. Yeah. He goes to Melee Mag 3. In fact, his
third issue was
his father called him Two Hands, right? Yeah. Because he was so dexterous and proficient. And then he leaves and he goes to train with Mushi and learn the ways of Nature and Ranger. So Ranger came second. But at the Icewind Dale time, that wasn't really on any of that. None of that was defined. And I loved how you could essentially say he was a fighter. And I loved how he used in that book, in Icewind Dale, he used swords, spears, bow and arrow. And it was funny to me because that sort of, to me, that's what defines being a fighter, right? Is having proficient with all these weapons. Yeah. And it's so funny to me now, this is why this is a tangent, is how nowadays fighters in all these games are super hyper specialized. Yeah. I'm a sword and board fighter. I'm a ranged fighter. I'm a 2-weapon fighter. And that's true.
All your feats go into one style. You don't have the money to afford more than one weapon type. And also, it doesn't matter. Pick up a hammer and trip everything. You're done.
Right. But even then, like the idea that like a fighter would be as dangerous or deadly with a bow as he would be with a 2-handed weapon, as he would be with a sword and board.
Which is how it kind of used to be.
Well, that's how it kind of used to be. And that's what I always thought was like really, really, really awesome about the fighter. And now it kind of is lacking. And so now the fighter doesn't feel like, because what made him a fighter felt like he could pick up anything.
Right.
And fight.
And just be a badass, right? And so now they kind of lost that. But yes, Dritz came around and this idea of 2-weapon wielding came in. And again, Ben said something in chat, which I think is really true, which is like, Ranger means like to go a-ranging,
Yeah, right. Wandering, said.
Yeah, so.
Not range combat.
Right, not range combat. But so anyway, that gets us to the sort of the modern idea of the Ranger. And at this point, the Ranger gets split into this melee character and into this martial character.
Yeah, but, and both, by the way, far physically weaker than their origins. They
Sure.
lost hit dice. They have less armor. They're not nearly as tough. Like even in 3rd edition, they got like endurance for free and stuff like that, right? Like now they're almost like this scout class,
Right.
Like they're like a slightly higher hit point rogue.
Right. Well, and what I was going to say is sort of the final nail in the coffin was World of Warcraft.
The hunter, yeah,
The hunter.
yeah. Which actually, I'm glad you bring that up because I wanted to talk about it in terms of this post.
Yeah, because what ends up happening is you had Dritz Duerden, who was this 2-weapon wielder, but had this pet, this companion, which was actually an astral magical item.
I'll say it wasn't an item. It wasn't really.
It wasn't a pet. It was
Yeah.
just an astral magical item. So they kind of stole that aspect of it. They
made
got
it a
rid of,
class feature.
and then they got rid of the 2-weapon fighting. But then somehow the ranger became like a hunter,
Right.
and then WoW made that hunter, and then people were like, "Oh, that's what a ranger is. I want to be like my hunter in WoW."
Mm-hmm.
And so now it like doubled down, and suddenly you had this idea of like the ranger is this class that fights with 2 weapons or a bow and arrow,
Right.
and
Has
has
a
pet and some random nature abilities.
Right.
And furthermore, fundamentally, it's because the class hasn't had a need to exist. Because in my personal opinion, the existence of the ranger was probably predicated on the idea that in original games of Dungeons and Dragons, wilderness exploration was a big component.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you could get lost easily, and there was all sorts of problems. And
It's
the
also typically the more dangerous parts of the game.
right, and rangers had this great ability to deal with the threats that one was going to fight in the wilds. They were kind of the preeminent, I guess you could say, overland exploration
Yeah.
class.
And I think that
And people just
persisted
don't do that anymore.
through like early 3rd edition, where like 3rd edition's core design was still around this idea of like, if you have this class, you're good. If you don't, this thing's going to screw you up, right? And that factored in animal encounters, wilderness encounters. One of my favorite examples is in Sunless Citadel. There's this encounter with harpies, I believe. And if you don't have a bard, like they basically are just going to lure you into a pit trap.
I don't remember that part.
It might not be Sunless Citadel.
I think Sunless Citadel. It's like you go in. I think
Harpies
you
are
make a
pretty
left and go up.
pretty high, pretty
It's not a
hefty.
harpy. Maybe it's some weird bird-like creature that
Man, I don't remember that.
Like,
I mean,
charms
ran
you,
it,
basically.
so
That doesn't
unless
mean
you
you-
went off track.
No,
somewhere,
it just doesn't mean you necessarily explored every single thing in that
ooh,
dungeon.
Gotta
Yeah.
revisit it.
Anyways, my point is very quickly in that addition to game, they were showing you kind of like PBTA, right? They were showing you the strengths and weaknesses of your class.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And as Derek was saying, the ranger big strength was like wilderness. I think as you get into later editions, we lose more and more of this. 5th edition actually really screwed the pooch on this because they made rangers too good. Dealing with wilderness to the point where it was boring,
Right.
so like if you had a ranger, it was auto win. No, don't wilderness is dead.
I'm
Like-
trying to think. When we played DTX, my brother was a ranger, and
Well, we were playing DTX.
I know, but I was like,
DTX.
he also just always tracked and seeked and like perceptioned us to find out where we were going. I'm like, I don't know if how much of that was actually 5e versus.
Well,
because I'm not super for the 5e
specifically,
ranger.
we didn't do a lot of wilderness
Mhm.
exploration in DTX. But rangers, and keep in mind, 5th edition they've redesigned the rangers like 3 times now or something.
Oh, really?
Not because they
It's
can't
one of
do
the
it right.
it's one of the classes that gets routinely voted to be the worst.
Yeah.
Oh,
But the first
God, I don't know why I
couple-
keep picking this thing. I know it's 5e, but seems like a follow suit.
the first couple of slices, they basically, if you had a ranger, you just ignored wilderness like completely.
Yeah.
You know.
By the way, we do have a super chat from
Yeah.
Dr. Metropolis.
Yep.
Hey, what's up, Doc? Martial Ranger is the only correct ranger. Please no more weird spell casting. So that's an interesting
Is that like
concept.
the druid sort of like
Well, because
tipping into
that's
the
the
ranger?
thing is like the spellcasting component of the ranger. It's a little, I don't know. I get it. I get where like, I mean, to me, that's more harkening back to the heart of the class of
Yeah,
what it was originally.
It's been there. Actually, it's
What
been
weird
there.
spell casting?
Yeah. So here's my thing:
I
is
think they got
I
rid
think
of it
the
in
ranger.
fourth.
Did they get rid of it? Yes. In 4th edition, the ranger is a martial class.
And in PF2, it was gone until the Advanced Player's Guide, where they
Yeah,
renamed this class like
the
before.
PF2 core ranger
Yeah.
is not a spellcaster. Here is why I don't agree with you, Dr. Metropolis, because without spellcasting, the ranger is just a fighter.
Well, that's what some people are saying. The ranger's just a background.
Yeah.
So what is it?
What defines the class? Because now that we live in a world, right, of skills,
right.
right? Before the game didn't have skills.
And this is really important, right? In the older editions of D&D, like if you picked your class, that was your class. That's just what you had access to, right? So the idea of like a fighter being good at the wilderness didn't really exist. There was a concept of non-weapon proficiencies, but not remotely at the same ability that like a ranger would have in the wilderness. They just flat out got class abilities that let them do it. So if you want to be good at the wilderness, you brought a ranger. If not, too bad.
You know, and that's
it's not like that anymore.
Yeah, and that's also kind of like a understanding how role playing games work, or how they should have worked. Right? Is when you didn't have like, you know, the third rule of Dungeon Craft is good adventures challenge the players and challenge their characters. And essentially, having abilities on your character were sort of like a cheat code because you, the player, weren't good enough. Right? Like, think of it this way. Like, could anyone track in original D&D? Of course they could. Yeah. You know, how would you'd have to describe it. And you'd have to go through this whole rigmarole with your GM about how you're trying to track. And, you know, he's going to give you a bunch of misleading information. It's going to be up to his whim and whimsy. But if you were a ranger, you're like, no, I have this ability in my character that I can kind of like flex on you. And, you know, that power or that rule allows me to sort of get what I want.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have it. But when you get to skills, now suddenly skills are democratized. Yeah. And now, you know, you can have people who are just doing anything. And so what does it mean to be a ranger?
And it's got even like more ridiculous, right? In third edition, skills were in this weird spot where they didn't matter for two reasons. Either you put your ranks in it and you were great and you beat all your DCs, or you had half rank. What was it? The non-class ranks. You can only put like half class. Yeah. You can only put half as many points into it, which means that you sucked and couldn't do anything. But now with 5th edition and PF2, like you get a skill, you got a skill, you're good. Like even in 4th edition, like you might lose a little bit of a bonus, but you still get your level modifier to it, right? So like to your point, yeah, anyone can do anything if they want. You can't do everything, but you can do anything.
Well, and this is what I'm trying to say is that like when you remove the magical elements from the ranger, what you're left with is a character who is proficient with a certain type of weapon type, which we already know the fighter can do, right? Dual wielding or ranged combat. You're just trying to put a different spin on it. Or you're left with this character who's like, yeah, he's a fighter, but he's got these cool skills. And it's like, but skills aren't.
I mean, I'm kind of in agreement with the chat when I think of what a ranger could be or should be. I don't know if I think of magic.
And lastly, I'll just, you know, to be blunt, the 1st edition ranger had magic. So like he's always been a spell casting class in my personal opinion. But I think that you need that because without that, it's just a fighter who lives in the woods.
I bet if you pull this chat, I bet you're going to get it the other way.
Well, that doesn't mean that they're right.
No, it's just interesting because it's like,
I mean, here's the thing, Bob.
You have to make a book right for the people.
If that's what you want to play, especially in PF2,
you don't have to, it's cast.
Be a fighter.
Yep.
Get the free archetype Beastmaster if you want a pet, and then take the scout background.
Yep.
You're done. You are now a better ranger.
Yeah.
Isn't there like an archer background too, or archer?
Wow, you're a fighter. Who cares?
I'm just saying.
Attack is king.
Yeah. I'm going to take the archetype that's dedicated to this type of things. I'm still going to be worse at that than just a fighter would be on a Tuesday. Fair. But yeah, so you know, Beowulf was saying how like, you know, in 1st edition, rangers weren't just, again, you know, you got to know your Tolkien here, but like rangers weren't just wilderness people. They were paladins of the woods.
Yes, that's a great way to say it.
You know, they were champions of humanity.
Yeah.
Right? They were the bulwark in the wild against the dark.
In a way, they were like little points of light out in the
right.
world, you
and
know?
so they had this just this gravitas, you know, this strength.
Yeah.
And it just really defined them. And in fact, I very much, even in that time and era, did not really view the ranger and the druid as being sort of co area, because to me the druid felt much more detached.
Yeah.
The druid felt more like I'd rather save the
nature over humanity.
I'd rather save nature over humanity. The ranger was not that.
Right. It's interesting because like, yeah, the ranger got some of these abilities, but I almost feel like they wrestled it. Like they like dominated nature versus like the druid who's like working hand in hand with nature.
Right.
Because the ranger was very much on the side of civilization, you know, on the side of like humanity.
Right. They were
human loosely.
Yeah, they were, you know, again,
I guess my view is just tainted because I am thinking of sort of like
I mean, tainted I wouldn't call it tainted.
It's not your fault. Like a Rambo type, like a guy in the woods, but he's also really skilled because he's like sort of this army dude. but like that's just a fighter in the woods.
Someone actually said special forces in the
Yeah.
chat, and that's not entirely wrong. And we're not, trying to tell you right think here. If anything, my point is like it's very easy for anyone to have a confused picture of the Ranger, because that's kind of what the point of what we're saying is.
Yeah.
Is the history is so convoluted and changed for so many random reasons.
I'm kind of interested to hear your history lesson when you get into it.
I mean,
That's my favorite part of your streams.
I mean,
streams.
we did cover quite a bit of it, but like again, I just want to say that before we go into it, there's mechanical issues which we could talk about the 4E, the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Ranger, but again, part of the reason that the Pathfinder 2 Ranger missed for me, personally, is just because that. Now I know, like in APG, they got their warden spells, which was fine. But part of it for me was that they felt like to me that's what made them not just a background.
It definitely felt like kind of like a weaker fighter in PF2.
Yeah.
And then,
I mean,
I felt like it played like a weaker
I
fighter.
was like, it was for sure a weaker fighter. It was.
So I mean, that's a great point. Maybe before
rough.
we go into this, Bob, you wanna summarize your thoughts of your
I
experiences?
guess the real thing is,
Now, to be clear, wait, you've played 2 Rangers.
I played 2 Rangers.
You played a Ranger in
Abomination Vaults.
and then you played a Ranger in our Quest for the Frozen Flame.
Yes, and Abomination Vaults, we were playing, I think, Gravity Weapon incorrectly at the time, which made me feel really good because you were sort of.
That's how we knew we were playing it wrong.
That's exactly how we knew we were playing wrong, because I was like, this is actually doing really fun stuff or a lot of damage, and it was not right.
What was your type in AV? Your whatever it is, like a subclass.
Precision, I think. You're talking about what type of damage? Yeah,
your precision.
Precision Ranger, I think.
The one that does the bonus damage once around.
Yeah, because I was all about hitting really hard with my hammer.
And what were you in?
Flurry.
Flurry. The one let me multi-hit.
Got it.
Yeah. And each one was not great from my experience. And again, Damien in the chat, he will tell me that I don't know how to play a Ranger and that he will teach me how to play a Ranger better. And he thinks the Ranger is amazing. But again, my personal experience, I've had a real rough time with it. I don't know if I'm doing it wrong, but I feel like I'm building it the right way, and then it's just not performing right. And I'm not doing enough damage. I'm barely hitting a lot. When I only do damage when I'm critting, which seems like, I mean, that seems like the barbarian problem that I was having.
I'll give you the.
I mean, I was good scouting.
No, but I'll give you a classic example
companion.
of how where the concept of the Ranger falls flat in a game like Pathfinder 2. There are 2 classes in the game that get quick draw. Okay, one is Rogue, and one is the Ranger. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the idea of quick draw is you can change your weapons, kind of, sort of, for free. Not quite, but kind of, sort of. On the Rogue, this works really well.
You have finesse.
Because all of their melee weapons are finesse, and their range weapons are obviously dexterity based.
Why would you ever use that on a Ranger?
But on a Ranger, if you're a Dex Ranger, because you want to use your bow, but then you want to pull out your swords, you are necessarily going to be bad with them. So they give these Rangers these abilities that, quite frankly, just don't, measure up. They just don't add up.
Yeah, the 2 things that I was good with,
and that's just an example of where they, they're trying to stick to what the Ranger was, but that doesn't work in the framework of the game.
Yeah, the 2 things I was good at, which I liked when I was a Ranger, which was the idea that I was way away from combat, so I survived a lot, and I had an animal companion who got into the fray, and that was actually kind of fun to play sort of that dynamic. But to your point, you could just do fighter, Beastmaster, and do the same thing I was trying to do, except for better. And so that's my point. Is like, why was I then doing that?
Right.
Why would I not just be a better version of a Ranger? I really wanted to be an archer, I think is what I want to do. Tracking archer. But I just felt like I was supposed to be a Ranger. And I think that's my problem. And so I don't know. I don't know if they fixed that.
I will say, and this could be because of how you played it. It could be because how the class is. Don't take this personally, Bob. It's not a knock against you. But at no point when I watched you play these Rangers did I ever go, well, that's cool. I wish I could do that. But going back to show weaknesses and strengths of classes, a lot of times when you play the game, everyone has their cool thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's awesome, right?
Yeah.
Like your Ranger felt like
when I played the Kineticist.
Exactly.
Day 1 of Kineticist, you're like, that's actually pretty cool.
That's cool.
I played the Ranger for weeks.
Comparing things to the Kineticist is a little unfair.
Or even oh, cool. A heal spell would be really cool right now. That's neat that you could do that. Hey, that fighter's really accurate. Sudden charge is really fun, Even like Kaz in wrestling was like, that's pretty cool, right?
Yes.
But with the Ranger, it's just like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
That was a lot of dice rolls for 7 points of damage.
So, so Beowulf, who I don't know if is super proficient with Pathfinder, she says, aren't there dex-based weapons? Now, to be clear, yes, a ranger could use daggers, or whatever, just like a rogue does. But the distinction is, the game is predicated on the idea that a ranger or a rogue is using these finesse weapons, which usually have a much lower damage die, but they're making up for it because they're sneak attacking.
Yes.
And they've got this huge sneak attack die. A ranger doesn't get that. So when a ranger, or they're a rogue and they have the thief subclass and they're adding their dex to damage. Mm-hmm. So when your dex ranger pulls out his 2 swords and goes, "Oh, I'm going to fight with my finesse. That way I can actually hit things." Fair, but your damage is going to be significantly nerfed. Yeah. You're not going to have sneak attack. You're not going to have dex to damage. And so what ends up happening is you're just like, this is pointless for me. I should just shoot my bow. And but the other issue,
I could be wrong on this, but don't they have worse action economy and even the barbarian? Like, to do their gimmick, they have to reactivate every time something dies.
Right. Well, we'll get to that in a second here, because
you can start to reload for free though, and that's kind of
we do have a super chat.
Like you have to remark your
hunt prey. Yes.
So Dr. Metropolis says, "What lore of magic? Who taught him? Is he reading wizard books in his downtime? My ranger has the beast pet and is a survivalist trapper. World of Warcraft got it right for me, but to each their own." Yeah. Listen, absolutely. I can very clearly say the modern ranger, takes a lot of its marks from, World of Warcraft. Mm-hmm. That being said, your hunter had a mana bar.
Absolutely. I think it's back now. I don't remember.
They got rid of it for a little bit, but then I think they brought it back.
It's hard to keep up with that game.
They do. But Entheo says, "Ranger on my wayward sons. There'll be peace when Remaster comes. Studios looking dope these days. Don't you cry no more."
Don't you cry hear that song, I just think of Supernatural.
Thank you, Entheo, for the chat. But thank you, Dr. Metropolis. Again, I don't listen. I'm glad that you enjoy, that particular type of thing. For me, a ranger again was this sort of chosen magical warrior of the wilderness, who again was sort of this paladin of the woods. And so I think that them being magical just felt right to me, because what you are all describing is like Bob was describing.
Yep.
It's a special forces. It's a hunter. It's like it's just someone who doesn't have any sort of thing special about them. And in that case, in this game, there are other classes that just do that better.
Right? Yes. And that's what I was saying. Like, when I played my barbarian and I kind of want to do a certain thing.
Yeah.
And then you guys are like, you should just do this. Class does it better.
Yeah.
It ends up being the fighter half the time.
So what Aaron was alluding to is something that we've talked about a lot, which is, and again, Paizo understands this, in my opinion now, which is a lot of the classes, one of the reasons why we always rank the fighter so highly, or even the rogue, is because there are things that they need to do. The fighter gets +2 to hit.
Full stop.
You don't need to do anything to do that. You get 3 actions on your turn, and a fighter is going to use those actions to, kick ass and take names. Now, the rogue, you could say, is the same thing. He needs to make the target flat-footed. But the fact of the matter is, if you watched our rogue video that Bob just published the other day,
that's right,
then you know that it's very easy, almost automatic, for a rogue to be getting flat-footed. In fact, everyone should be trying to get their enemy flat-footed anyways. Right. So if you're closing into melee, you're probably going to be making the person flat-footed anyways. So you're not really spending any extra actions. It's not like a rogue has to take an action to charge up their blade or something,
Activate sneaky sneak.
Yeah, activate sneak attack. The problem then becomes that you have classes in the game, like the barbarian, another class that you have experience with, Bob.
These are all these classes I think I like, and then I don't like them. And I really like the barbarian and the ranger in theory.
Is that they require an action to do their thing. And in the case of the barbarian, it's usually going to be one action of combat,
right,
where you're going to rage. And 90% of your feats don't work unless you're raging. You are basically completely priced into ranging. Now, the ranger is very similar with hunt prey, because
everything needs hunt prey.
Your flurry, your precision, none of this stuff works unless you're hunting prey. So if you're not hunting prey, you're just you're already a worse shot than the fighter. Now you're just insanely bad. But the problem is, you may do that once or twice or 3 times in a fight, And so what does that mean? It means you're spending
literally losing a round.
You're spending
in a
3
combat.
actions,
Damien said they're changing the need to hunt prey for everything in the remaster.
which is good.
Which is good.
Which is good.
Is that in this document? I haven't read through
Well,
it.
well,
I did
we'll
not
get into it.
see that.
Okay.
And I mean, for me, again, actions are the lifeblood of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Not only is it a great way to balance things, but it's also a fantastic way as a player to sort of make an important decision about, do I want to spend this action or
what is
not?
it worth?
What's it worth? And
You
in
like
my
those
mind,
decisions.
hunt prey should be like a fucking sniper scope, right? Like it is an option, and it's compelling because it does burn an action, but it should put like such an improvement in your ability to do damage to this creature that it's compelling.
Yeah.
If it's too good, obviously you'll just do it every time. But at the same time, it's like, well, I am paying a price. Here's the problem. The bonus that you get from hunting prey isn't actually worth you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make you better than everybody
you're
else.
paying the price to play the game.
It makes you the same as everybody else. Like, let me put it this way. Do you think that if like a ranger hunts prey against their target, they're suddenly better than the fighter, the barbarian, the monk, or the rogue?
Nope.
Again, no, of course not. They're on par, maybe.
Yeah.
And I argue that they're not even that.
Yeah.
So, Ann Ryder says the thaumaturge has a similar problem. Agreed, but exploit vulnerability is actually a good bonus.
Yes.
Which I agree. The thaumaturge is in an interesting spot. I don't know that it's perfectly balanced, where you go, maybe I do this, maybe I don't.
Damien brings up a good point. He said hunt prey should do what Hunter's Aim does, which is basically give you a +1 circumstance bonus to attack roll and ignore the prey's concealed condition.
I would be okay with that.
That seems like what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. I mean, long story short, if you're going to make this ranger into this like hunter, then they need to have that gimmick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they need to have that feel of like, I mean, in WoW, it was literally called what? Hunter's Mark?
It was called Hunter's Mark, yeah. And 4th edition, someone stole it from
But 4th edition was called, Jesus.
It's not called Jesus.
It's Quarry Prey or something like
Quarry,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, you're right.
But it was a bunch of extra damage.
yeah, because you had your quarry die to it.
Well, because
It was basically a mini sneak attack.
right. Because here's the thing. That this gets into the other issue.
Hunter's Quarry.
Hunter's Quarry, thank you.
Dr. Metropolis is on it.
Yeah, so the thing that was cool about, or the thing that like fails is like, I think the default, I think a lot of people are entranced by the flurry ranger. And I'll be honest with you. I've seen you play some bad
showed
characters.
precision.
Okay? I've seen you play some bad characters.
Yeah.
But watching your flurry ranger play in Quest for the Frozen Flame was probably the most painful thing I've ever seen in my life.
That was painful on top of a painful experience.
Yeah.
Because your character did so little damage.
Yes. Unless I critted. When I critted, it was awesome.
Right. But even then.
Okay, when I say awesome, it was what I should have been doing.
Here's the thing. You crit less than Tim, who would then crit for more.
That's my point. That is my point. It's like,
And then your bear would drown.
Right. Now Marty Mean is saying, to be honest, Flurry Ranger deals the most damage to one target in the whole game. Yes, I've seen those calculations that at a millionth level, that, when the Ranger has super supreme, ultimate flurry, and they're basically at like -0.
Yeah, doesn't the chart go like this, and then it's like at the end, they're like, okay.
Yeah, the Ranger does at the very end of the game.
so
and that's
at high level, the Flurry Ranger is good.
yes, if you're targeting one person, and again, and the reason for that is very simple, actually. It's because, and this is the Ranger's problem, this is Pathfinder 2's problem, because of the +10 crit rule. So in a game like D&D, 5th edition, 4th edition, at a certain point, there's diminishing returns.
Right.
If I give somebody a +900 to attack, they're still only going to crit on a 20.
Right.
So yes, and they're going to miss on a 1.
Yep.
And so at a certain point, having too high of an attack bonus almost doesn't matter.
Right.
But in Pathfinder 2, it's great.
Yes.
And so what ends up happening is Pathfinder 2 has sort of been defined by this game where like you want that one big shot. Especially with critical effects, having so much, especially not just critical effects from your critical specialization, but critical effects from your runes. I know there's a lot of people out there who are sitting on, greater crushing runes, or they're sitting on fearsome runes, or they're sitting on frost runes, or fire runes, or greater brilliance runes, and they want the crit because that is going to trigger all of those bonuses. So the one big shot is way more appealing in Pathfinder 2nd Edition than the many smaller shots. Right. It just doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And the Flurry Ranger for most of the game is just doing like ping, 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 ping. But the problem is
second half of the game, you're designed to be critting all the time.
But the problem is that even with the Flurry precision bonus, those attack bonuses are going down.
Yeah.
So at the very end of the game, they can finally their multiple attack penalty, I think, is -1.
Yeah.
So it's like it's so compelling at that point that they can actually be like, okay, these actually are kind of better. So, in my opinion, the Ranger has sort of two issues. It has this mechanical issue of action inefficiency and not really doing enough damage. And number two, again, what makes it unique? What makes it, sort of flavorful? What makes it sort of, stick out? So to that end, there's a link in the description below with Mike Sayer dropped on the community blog of Paizo.com a little bit of a preview on the Remastered Ranger. I have not taken a look at this, so
I have not either.
I have read it.
Okay, so this will be new for us. So here we go. We'll go through this. The Ranger is a wilderness warrior, a character who's good with weapons, good with animals, good in the wilds, and who can sprinkle just a little bit of magic into their repertoire if they feel like it. Now, on the surface,
good statement.
Good statement. I mean, it feels very in line with like some of the classic tropes that we've been talking about.
Said the words wilderness warrior.
Wilderness warrior, which I do appreciate that. Right. Notice nothing in here about hunter.
Right. Nothing about 2 weapons.
Nothing about special ops. Nothing about it's a wilderness warrior. And you know what? Even look at the art. I'm sorry, I don't have the.
Oh yeah.
I used it in the thumbnail.
Little double axe guy.
No, but like the Ranger in Paizo's art, even going back to PF1, but in PF2, they've always been sort of shown as being like extra prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah,
this guy's got a backpack full of just crap.
It's like a thaumaturge. It's like crap's hanging all over him.
Right, but like you look at like art of Valeros. He's got his armor and his swords, and that's it.
This is very Wayne Reynolds, though. It's like
no, it is. It's very Wayne Reynolds. But my point is that like the Ranger is sort of just kind of looks like they are prepared for anything.
Yeah.
And the shit hits the fan, they're good to go. So I like that. I feel like that is an important element of the class, and it's kind of missing when you think about it. All right. By and large, this is one of the classes that most people consider to be solid effective.
So
it's not you.
I really don't want to.
Wait. Good at its role both thematically and mechanically. And I literally just said I feel like it's failing thematically and mechanically.
I don't want to shit on Sire, but I have to ask if he played this character.
Again, Damien thinks that this is actually accurate, and he's played the Ranger a lot. So maybe I'm just not playing the right Ranger.
Listen, people think the Alchemist is a good class, and the Witch,
I still like him. I just think he doesn't do well.
I think it's fine to like it, but they're like these problems that we're referencing. They're like objective truths. There are issues. Like for example, with the action economy, that's a real thing. And by the way, to answer whoever asked, I did look for that in here, and they don't address it in this article, which doesn't mean that they won't.
Correct.
But a lot of the comments are you going to fix Hunter's Prey? Because
everyone knows.
Yeah. Everyone knows, right? So I don't know.
So the next sentence is we're not inclined to fix things that aren't broken, and every comment is fix Hunt Prey.
This feels like self-serving PR. We did a great job, and there's totally no reason for us to do a remaster, but we're going to do it anyway.
Right.
Come on, guys.
Yeah. So again,
we can be respectful and also acknowledge that there's problems.
I will wait to pronounce final judgment until the class gets printed.
Not a good start.
But that's kind of fine. Yeah. Fruitless Endeavor asks, would Hunt Prey be fine if it was a free action or could be applied automatically when the Ranger strikes and reapplied if their current prey dies? Actually, Fruitless Endeavor, I think what would be more interesting is if Hunt Prey was an interesting decision to be made. And there's a couple of ways that you could do that. Like one could be that maybe Hunt Prey takes 2 actions, but gives you a very large bonus or gives you a set of abilities to choose from. The second option, Fruitless Endeavor, is that Hunt Prey somehow refunds you an action.
Yeah, makes something else more efficient. And you can see that they've been doing that design a lot with things like the Kineticist. And actually one of the things, skipping ahead a little bit in this article, they talk about Crossbow Ace in here. And it's the same kind of new design where they're like, hey, when you take this activity, it allows you to do these other activities more efficiently. You get a free one. And so, there's still a choice, but they kind of balance out. the action economy a little bit. And like, it doesn't make sense to do that if you're not doing the thing.
Right.
But it's more engaging than just burning action to play your character.
Right. Because the issue for this endeavor, and I'm not trying to dunk on you or anything like that, is if you're going to make hunt prey a free action, whatever, like you should just get rid of it entirely. It should just be part of the class.
Why is it there if it's just free?
The whole issue here, I don't mind things costing an action.
Right.
By all accounts, Spell Strike is very, very powerful on the Magus. But then they have to make that decision. Do I basically want to kind of burn an action to kind of reset it? And in theory, that's a compelling choice. And so that kind of, puts them into a situation where it's like, oh, do I want to do this or not? My issue with things like Hunt Prey on the Ranger, or my issue with things like the Barbarian is you're sort of forced to do those things.
And like we've lived this. Like Bob actually, before his Barbarian got brutally murdered, was trying to play this Barbarian without raging. And Bob also had like caster capability. So it wasn't just a completely
correct
insane decision. Bob wanted to rely more on his casting, his concentration type abilities to fight. But it just didn't work. Like his character immediately fell apart.
So
and so did I.
And so did Bob. But it just really illustrates that it's such a choice. It's just an uninteresting thing that you have to do just to play the game. And it's just like, well, why is this here then?
Right, like you don't feel cool for hunting prey.
Not in that last game, but the idea that I'd be hunting a prey does sound cool.
Right.
No, the concept's cool. But he's asking, is spending the action fun?
I just felt like I had to do it so that I could do what I needed to do.
Right. And in fact, one thing which you didn't really take too much advantage of, Bob, because you failed every single time, but you had a feat or something like that, which I thought was pretty underpowered in Pathfinder 2, which was a Monster Hunter feat, very underpowered feat. And actually, I changed it completely. And the way that the Monster Hunter feat was that it gives you a free action. You can recall knowledge when you hunt a prey.
Yeah.
But my shtick was if you pass that DC, I basically let it count as you having prepared aid
for everyone.
For everyone in the party.
That was in our AV campaign.
That was in our AV campaign.
Yeah.
So basically, the idea was
I remember I failed so many times.
But you never passed the DC.
I missed every recall knowledge.
Well,
check.
so that's I mean, not to go off on another rant here, but look at how they fixed this with the Thaumaturge.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, they use charisma.
The Thaumaturge has esoteric. They're like, well, the Thaumaturge has to make checks. Okay, well, how are they going to make that? They're charisma-based class. We'll just make esoteric lore and make it based off of charisma.
Yeah. What was your int on your Rangers?
Right. Well, not just int, but wisdom.
That's true. Yeah.
Right. Because in order for the Monster Hunter Ranger to be successful, you have to have every freaking skill trained.
Yeah.
Or at least Arcana. Occultism, religion, and nature.
Those DCs are hard, especially when you start stacking on common and rare.
I'm pretty sure I went strength, constitution with that ranger.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, of course you did. And so what ends up happening is the Thaumaturge, you think about it this way. I mean, if the Thaumaturge was designed first and the Ranger came second, you would see the Ranger would have something called monster lore, and it would be based off of Dex.
It's not bad.
And you'd be like, what the hell?
What are we doing?
What are we even doing here? So Shadra says, doesn't the free knowledge check work off of nature? I don't believe so. I think it's just a recall knowledge check.
Recall knowledge.
Let's take a look here. And again, I understand that that's a feat, but no, it's just you make a recall knowledge check about your prey.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, if you critically succeed at identifying your hunted prey with recall knowledge, you and your allies get a +1 circumstance bonus on your next attack roll against that target. So it's like, that's only when you critically succeed. So it's very, very brutal. And I was like, I like the idea. I was very much inspired by the scene from Two Towers where Legolas is up on the wall with all the other elves. And they all got their bows and he's telling them where their armor is weak. Right. At the neck and at the shoulder, and
because he recalled knowledge,
he's sharing that information. I like the idea of the Ranger sort of, kind of rallying the troops and sort of bringing them all focused in on their, on their prey and sort of sharing some of those bonuses. So, anyways, back to what we got here. All right. By and large, this is one of the classes most people consider to be solid and effective, good at its role both thematically and mechanically. Agree to disagree. While we're not inclined to fix things that aren't broken, it's like, man, they really are just trying to be like, they're trying to do everything they can do to make it sound like there aren't flaws with their game.
Right. Which Everything has flaws. It's okay, guys.
It's okay to have flaws. The Ranger being a generally solid and effective class pre-remaster didn't mean we didn't have some notable opportunities to go in and spruce a few things up, improve the general progression and experience, and I'll be talking about a few of those things here. Okay. The magical element of the Ranger is often one of its more understated aspects, but it's one that people really care about. Originally, Ranger focus spells called Warden spells were added to the class after the fact in the APG. Mm-hmm. And one of the downsides to this was that since they weren't built into the class originally, the class did not have mechanisms in place to ensure that the Ranger's spellcasting proficiency improved as the character leveled up. I mean, that's just oversight 101. Yeah. In the remaster, we've baked the spellcasting progression directly into the Ranger's core chassis, ensuring that class features like Ranger Expertise and Masterful Hunter naturally progress the Ranger's spellcasting proficiency all the way up to Master. We've also streamlined the feats.
This is just a bug fix, honestly.
Yeah, this is like a bug fix. We've also streamlined the feats that the Ranger uses to accrue their Warden spells and recategorize the spells into easily referenced group. The first level Initiate Warden feat allows you to choose any of the Warden spells, which are the Ranger's focus spells. And there are regularly paced feats all the way up to the 10th level Peerless Warden feat that gives you access to the strongest Ranger focus spells available. So, a couple things. Number one, I actually am okay with the Ranger being a spellcaster that uses focus spells. I actually think that's fine. Yeah. I think that's cool. I think that's...
Yeah, it seems pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah. That being said, it's weird...
Also, focus spells are a lot better.
It's weird that your character will be getting spell progression increases but not have any spells. Isn't that a little weird?
It is weird.
Does it say they're not going to get spells? Because I thought...
Well, you still have to take the feats.
Yeah, you take the feats.
If you don't take Initiate Warden as a feat, you will not gain spells. But your character class features are going to say that your spell DCs are going to increase up to Master, even if you never take any spells. That's just a little...
Does the Ranger use class DC for anything?
What if you archetype into something?
I don't know. But I mean, it's just one of those situations where it's like, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, if you pick up like something with a primal caster list, are you a better... Assuming they get primal tradition, are you a better primal caster now?
Yeah, I don't know. In any case,
we'll have to read it. It'll be interesting.
As well in Remaster, they work with innate spells and archetype spells.
So, along with the general improvements to spellcasting, and again, the general improvements to spellcasting. So it sounds like, okay, number one, they realize, oops, this guy's DC didn't scale, which that's a bug fix.
Yeah.
That, originally we were thinking that it'd be fine for the Ranger to have a trained spell DC at level 18. I mean, in retrospect, we decided...
APG had a lot of problems.
So, okay. But number two, Bruno's, by the way, saying monks are like that, right? Where they get... Their key DC goes up even if you never take any of the key spells.
Okay.
Cool. That's fair enough. And then apparently, I'm assuming this is implying that there's going to be some new focus spells available to the Ranger.
I'm sure.
So
I don't know why there wouldn't be.
I mean,
a chance to add them in.
Yeah. So it says because there's going to be a 10th level Peerless Warden feat that gives you the strongest Ranger focus spells, which start at 5th rank. So 5th rank's pretty cool. That's Kona Code level. I mean, it's focus spells, but
it's kind of a on par with like the older Ranger who would get up to like,
right.
Spells.
Again, you're right. The old Ranger used to get up to 4th level rank spells, 4th rank spells, as we would call them now. They were never like a full caster, and I'm okay with that. Yeah. So
and Pathfinder 2 doesn't have your typical class list, but the focus spells fill that niche really well. I mean,
again, as someone who believes that magic should exist, and I mean, obviously it's Pathfinder 2, you have to usually spend feats to get it. Like, if they do this well, I think I like this change. I certainly like that they're trying to make the spell DCs actually work.
Yeah, I mean, I like that casting works now for Ranger. That's good. Good job.
Right. Good job on that. Along with the general improvements to spellcasting, we also added some new feats to help make certain builds. Oh, I just hate builds. I just hate that word. I hate that. I hate that. Like, I mean, look,
that's an us thing.
That's just an us thing.
Everyone playing this game except for us.
Right.
I was like, I think they're fine.
Yeah, it's one of those things. But anyways, this is definitely a case of like they're writing to their audience.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. So it's
I mean, yeah, it makes sense, right? Builds. We did nothing wrong. The game's totally perfect. Here's some new stuff. I mean, yeah, 100%. This is the Pathfinder 2 audience.
But anyways, we added some new feats to help make certain builds pop and shine a bit more brightly. Precision Rangers who like combining Warden spells with big shots from crossbows. That is a very specific niche.
That's
I don't
what
know
I would be
a lot about
doing
the
now.
Ranger. Is this a common thing?
Precision Rangers who like combining shots with crossbows.
That's what you do, gravity weapon. That's what I was trying to do, but I did it with a hammer ineffectively. But I should have been doing. But that's what Damien I think does. He does the Precision Ranger one big shot.
Oh. Well, cool. Damien will appreciate the Warden's reload feat.
Damien says this paragraph is for me.
Noted.
Precision Rangers who like combining Warden spells with big shots from Crossbow will likely appreciate the Warden's reload feat, which you can pick up at the low cost of level fucking 16.
I just saw that. What the fuck?
Which allows them to reload as a free action once per round when they cast a Warden spell. Well, it's a good thing that my companions are traveling through time and space and that we're fighting gods floating in the elemental plane. Now I can reload a crossbow quickly.
GM Scott just tipped.
Oh, GM Scott. With the big tip, thank you, GM Scott, says most issues in PF2 are that the mechanics don't match up with most people's fantasy. But with the Ranger, there's the added complication that there are so many fantasies about what a Ranger actually is.
That's a good observation.
No, that's a very good observation. Yeah. And I think that's, you know, look, love it or hate it, the fighter's going to fight, you know, it doesn't matter what you pick. The fighter's just like, yeah, you hit things and you're really good with your weapons. You know, it delivers.
Yeah.
You know, again, that's another reason why we don't like the Barbarian, because I think that the Barbarian has that fantasy of being this this impossible, unstoppable juggernaut.
Yeah.
And when people think of that, they think of two things, right?
5e Barbarian.
Hard to kill and doing a lot of damage.
Right.
And I argue that the Pathfinder 2 Barbarian does not.
The hard to kill part they failed on.
It's a glass cannon.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, he does do a lot of damage. When he crits, he's great. He actually does do a lot of damage. I had a lot of fun doing a lot of damage, but I died and got knocked down a lot.
Yeah.
And in 5e, I felt like a boss.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I was like literally running in every time. Like, I don't care. I'll be on the front line. I'm taking half damage, boys. Get behind me.
Yeah.
Like, this is so
No,
sweet.
I mean, I remember watching your face.
Yeah.
In that, and that was probably one of the happiest you've ever been. Just in general. Like, it's probably somewhere along the lines of like your children's birth, 5e Barbarian, marrying your wife.
we love you, Stacy. So yeah, like, yeah, I mean, that was obviously a great moment for you. But yeah, so anyways, level 16. What the heck?
That's, you know, and before I forget, I have another comment too. Like,
Okay.
Damien said the feat wasn't written for him.
Yeah. You know, and again, I'm reading into this a little bit, so I don't actually know, but like they made a comment here. We're also added some new feats to help make certain builds pop, right? And translating this a little bit, right? We're adding feats to fix some of the problems of our class.
Yeah, these are very much, in my opinion, these are like the game doesn't work, so you have to take one of your feats to make this work.
Right. And that's a feat tax, right? I
It's
don't
a feat
like
tax.
fixing things through feats unless you're replacing a feat that's busted. If you're fixing it by adding more feats, like then either I'm giving something up or I didn't have anything good to choose from.
The classic example of this is this option is unviable.
Right.
But if you take this feat, now that option is on par with other options.
Right.
And you're like, oh, cool.
Thanks for the fix.
Thanks for the fix. If it's like, wait, I'm paying a cost so that I can be at the same level as anybody else who didn't pay any cost.
Yeah.
And so that is, and it's like, it's particularly insidious because what it's really doing is it's feat taxing people who, well, okay, there's like two ways to think about this. One is it's feat taxing people who like, I just want to have my cool fantasy of my character having this completely stupid idea, which shouldn't work and the rules don't support it. But then the game's like, oh, yes, it can. Look, you could spend these feats and then it'll make it work. And people go, oh, look at this. The game is allowing me to do anything. And it's like, well, no, it's actually saying this is a bad idea.
Right.
And it's actually forcing you to pay a bunch of additional costs
to do the thing
just to do the thing that you want to do. But the worst, maybe the more insidious example is people think I've spent a lot of resources into this. I must be amazing.
Nope.
But you're not. You've just invested all of this resources and character build components just to be at par.
Yeah.
Or and maybe in some cases below other classes that are just, you know, straight out better. Now, I get it. Class design is a really, really tough thing because the only alternative to this, there's two alternatives to this. Number one, and this is very anathema to Pathfinder 2. Number one, you just don't give people those stupid, horrible, bad options. Okay, you just get rid of it. But you know, the game is like, no, we want to have 750 weapons because
parts of PF2 design kind of met in the middle with archetypes, right? I think it was an APG actually. You got all these random archetypes that are like a certain weapon style, a certain technique, stuff like that. So like that's cool if you want to be like the idiot that throws rocks and still is a ranger, right? But the archetypes also have inherent issues in that they can't do things to like increase your proficiency, because otherwise that'd be busted, right? And we can't step on the fighter's toes. That's like the one golden rule that we will forever have, is the fighter always has to have that +2, right?
Yeah.
But that's one way to kind of do what you're talking about, where if you really want that dumb thing, you can mix and match with archetypes, which I think in concept is a good design, right? Let the ranger be this pristine thing that the ranger's going to do, and if you got these ridiculous little things you want to do on the side, mix in an archetype and trade out some feats. That seems like reasonable to me if everything there worked well.
Yeah. Actually, as you say it, especially under the context of hunt prey, if any class should be the most accurate class, it should be the ranger.
I agree.
Yes.
Like, how is that? This is supposed to be the one shot, one kill hunter.
Yeah.
Like, this is the class that should be super hyper accurate.
I thought I was getting into that, and then it didn't happen.
Not deliver. Lotha said, like, what if hunt prey like took 2 actions, but it let you refocus, to get back all of your focus points. I don't actually. I think that's kind of an interesting idea.
Yeah. It definitely mixes up the traditional.
Or if assuming spellcasting was more primary to the ranger, the idea that like you could only cast your focus spells on targets that you've hunted prey. So it's like you need to like focus your sort of energy against them.
About their focus spells to know if they have like any good utility.
Yeah, I don't know either. So. Shadram says gunslingers get fast reload at level 1, but rangers need 15 more levels to pull back a bowstring while casting a spell. Right, gunslinger can reload a gun as a free action.
I think the gun just reloads itself.
Actually, it's like ridiculous. It's like
and by the way, remember, these are old ass guns.
It's like
it's not even a revolver, right? Which is still like. Right? Like if you ever read The Gunslinger and they make a big deal about why Roland was a badass because he could reload a revolver with one hand. Like that was his like crowning achievement, right? But we're not even dealing with that. We're dealing with, tally ho, lads!
The best is like you're doing
reaction.
You're behind the screen looks so inappropriate what you were doing. Like behind your computer screen, you're like just doing all sorts of stuff.
I mean, it's very similar. Aeon Rider says, I felt the same when I played an Archer Ranger in PF1. So many feats just not to suck. And they're specifically referring to the fact that you basically had to take, because you got like a -8 to hit.
Oh yeah, if you're shooting in shooting in the cover in melee,
right?
I think it was like -8.
Right, so there was like a feat you basically had to take just so you could even play the game.
There was a feat tree.
We have Dr. Metropolis and GM chatted again.
Oh, we had a super chat from Dr. Metropolis.
Yeah.
And we just got a tip from Jim Scott. All right, Dr. Metropolis says, to echo GM Scott, the class needs to be broken up into the WoW Hunter and the Tolkien Ranger. Currently, it doesn't please either by trying to do both. Yeah.
Actually, I thought PF2 did try to do that, which is why Warden was basically a
separate
subclass.
thing.
Yeah. In the core
well, it's
PF2
not a subclass, though. It's just it's a line of feats that you can take.
It's part of your build, Derek.
Yeah.
It's part of your build.
Sorry, it's part of your build.
In the core PF2 rulebook, you didn't even have access to spells.
Right.
And they added that in the APG.
Right, exactly. But I definitely agree with you. I think the Ranger is trying to do too much, and I think it fails at all of them. But
and the reason why is, as GM Scott said, like it fails at class identity. What is the Ranger?
Right. And I don't think the Ranger.
You can't just say a fighter in the woods, because then you would just literally make a fighter in the woods. So we have to beat around the bush until
but it's also a really big problem when most of the time in modern day campaigns you're not ever in the woods.
Yeah, but we haven't even gotten to that point.
That got brought up too. Like we don't even do exploration. So what's the point?
Our idea of exploration is walking around the massive AP site, which is like 100
slightly
feet.
Larger than the size of the studio.
You're like this is the enemy's compound. It's their secret fortress. It's got 17 encounters. It's got like 12 encounters. It's 120 feet by 150 feet. And then you go, what is your character's speed? You're like, oh, well, I took fleet, so I actually have a speed of 35. And you're like, and
I have a long strider one.
Right, I have a long strider, so 45. I'm like, so in one round, 6 seconds, your character can move 135 feet?
Right.
So in one round, your character can move across this entire area? Yeah, that's not what I'm calling here a huge area,
No, most of the time they're exploring the town.
Yes.
That's exploration.
Yeah. Having feat taxes to make the ranger be on par with other classes is our tip from Jim Scott. Having feat taxes to make the ranger be on par with other classes that didn't open or didn't spend feats is like Northern Reaches. Evil gets bonuses, but good doesn't. Yeah.
Accurate.
Yeah, accurate.
Geo Scott's played like Northern Reaches like 2 times, and he has all these comments on it.
I mean, he's not wrong about.
He's not wrong.
Yeah.
He kind of summed it up pretty nicely.
Yeah.
I don't know if that argument would have worked though. So how come I can't do cool things fast? Because you're a ranger.
Right.
Yeah.
What?
Now, Joseph says our party's ranger deals 2/3 the damage of the Magus, but shines in splitting the damage between foes rather than just dealing it all in one hit, which is fine. I'm curious about that, though, because, usually you can only have one prey hunt at a time, although you do eventually get the ability to hunt like 2 foes at once. So maybe you're a little bit higher level than Joseph. But I would also argue that, unfortunately, in most D20-based games, splitting your damage is usually not a good thing.
Yeah.
Usually you want to focus fire as much as you possibly can. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, good news is that by being level 16, you can finally redo this. Ranger snares are going to be the one thing not
we haven't actually read this fate, though.
Oh, it says once per round.
Yeah.
Your last action was to cast a warden spell.
Yep.
Your mastery of magic and weapons, like the crossbow, allows you to wield both with ease. Interact to reload a weapon you are currently wielding. So for a free action, you can interact to reload a weapon you are currently wielding. All right, level 16. There you go. Ranger snares are going to be the one thing not appearing in player core that were originally available to the class. They just gave up on those. Snares were kind of the least satisfying of the options available to the Ranger and the least used options, so we've pulled them out of the class. They'll be in player core 2 along with the snare caster archetype and a much needed facelift. So they basically have admitted snares were not worthy of a class. They should just be an archetype.
No, Derek, come on. Why would we fix something that's not broken?
I don't know if the last time anybody put a snare up.
So
I don't even know why I need to be architect. Why can't I just if I want to do
never
a
played
snare?
a Ranger in PF2, but WoW has something similar.
Okay.
I thought it was stupid.
Trap rangers were okay. Trap hunters, sorry.
It wasn't for me. Ironically, in PF2, a game that wishes it was 4th edition, I could see how snares could be cool, right? The idea of manipulating terrain and setting things up. But in practice, it's hard to do it in a video game. Like, I just feel like it's so cumbersome to do it in a tabletop.
I think the only way you're doing it is if you're in some sort of camping woods exploration. Like when we played PF1 Repentathuk, and we were in that, like, we were going to camp for the night in that little abandoned thing.
Yeah.
That's like the perfect time to like set up some snares around the camp.
That's different, though. These are designed to be used in a combat.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what I don't understand. That's
like what you're saying makes complete and total sense.
So we're on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah, this is like, on my turn, I'm going to shoot, walk back, and I'm going to chuck a snare. And now the GM is in the position of like, all right, do I walk through the trap and set it off?
Yeah, also, what does that look like? 'Cause
I don't know.
It's like, it took me 2 seconds to do that. It's like, like, like
bear track.
Yeah, like I'm just throwing a bear trap out. Now, to be fair, like that's literally what happened in World of Warcraft.
Correct.
And like
I thought it was silly then too. And the monsters would run right into it.
But no, it got better because I'm pretty sure in World of Warcraft they would throw it out and it would like fade because I think it would become stealthed.
Yeah, somehow.
So it became an invisible magical trap.
Invisible magic trap.
But then when they got hit with it, it was like an explosion of ice or fire, not my leg.
You got roped.
Well, it's getting a much needed facelift, is what it says.
All right, well,
I look forward to seeing how they make that compelling.
Yeah,
maybe by facelift they mean it's gone.
There were also a few places where we had feats that many people saw as being taxes that you had to pay to accomplish a specific flavor. All right. But there was no problems with the class, huh? All right. Anyways,
problems. Totally fine.
For example, the crossbow ace feat that originally appeared in the player's Pathfinder core rulebook was written under the assumption that all crossbows were simple weapons. In other words, because it was a simple weapon, crossbows didn't do as much damage. They were an inferior weapon to the bow, the longbow or the short bow. And so crossbows.
A lot of rangers play with crossbows.
So crossbows suck. But people got a hard on for the fantasy of the ranger with the crossbow. And so they gave you this.
Is that what it is, or was there some later release fishing crossbow? That's broken?
That is 100% what it was.
People were
like because here's the deal. People were like, the game was like crossbows have to be simple, bows have to be martial. I don't know if that's because of the legacy of, crossbows being simple in 3rd edition, Pathfinder 1. The idea that crossbow is easier to shoot than a bow. So, but because it's simple, means it can't have the same number of weapon point, the damage dice plus traits, can't equal the same. It's got to be a worse weapon.
Yep.
But people want to be that with their ranger. So they had to give a feat, crossbow ace, which virtually made the crossbow better, but it didn't make it superior. It just made it so that it wasn't a horrible choice for you.
So it's a feat tax to have a flavor option.
It's a feat tax to have a flavor option. So it provided a damage bonus that essentially converted those simple weapons into martial weapons. But here's the worst part. But it was only when you took certain actions.
Oh.
So it was circumstantial.
Like
fixing.
Hunt, Prey, or reloading.
That's what I'm reading. When you wielded a crossbow and use Hunt, Prey, or use Interact to reload your crossbow, you get a +2 circumstance bonuses damage roll on your next strike with that crossbow. Also, increase the damage dice of the size for that attack by 1 step.
If your crossbow is a simple weapon. So It's like basically not only did it did all that work to make it equal to the bow, it was a feat tax, but then even then it was circumstantial because it was now obviously, you're hunting prey and interacting to reload your crossbow. But what does this mean? It means even more now because I go into the fight. I've got my crossbow loaded.
Yep.
Okay. The fight starts. Well, now if I don't hunt prey, my crossbow just sucks.
Yeah, it just gets worse.
So now it just gets it. Now you're more doubled down on having to pay for that, action
that's what they
tax.
do. They do precision ranger, gravity weapon, crossbow ace.
Right.
Lay it in there.
That's
One
their
big shot.
rotation for their sick build.
There are no rotations in Pathfinder 2. Silence.
They're not.
You're
because
not.
you just do the same thing every round.
So it's not a rotation.
You're not really rotating through anything.
It's just a line. All right. So where were we here? The crossbow ace, was written under the assumption that crossbows were a simple weapon and provided a damage bonus that converted those simple weapons into martial weapons whenever you took certain actions, like hunt prey or reloading. This ended up having a couple of issues. On the one hand, the damage bonus was big enough that it felt like the feat was a must-have if you were going to be using a crossbow, crowding out...
Just to be clear, we're talking about the difference between D6 and D8, right?
That is correct.
So +1 damage.
Correct.
Cool.
Correct. Crowding out build versatility and other options. On the other hand, the feat was actively fighting with the Ranger's play loop. If you were tracking your prey before combat began and you had your crossbow in hand loaded and ready to fight, you didn't have a way to get your damage bonus.
That's actually kind of funny.
Playing the character the way that everything in the game was trying to tell you to play your character was leading to situations where you couldn't use the abilities you were supposed to be using in the situations you were supposed to be using them.
But the class is totally fine.
I didn't even think about this. I let people track prey before combat a lot of times too, and that is funny.
But makes sense. You're
but like then all of a sudden your crossbow doesn't do the amount of damage it does.
And because you're already hunting them, there's no way for you to get that bonus.
Okay, you could hunt the prey, and then when you're about to strike, reload, and now you're good.
But it's already loaded.
Well, no. So
you keep it unloaded.
Oh,
right. So when you're going into combat, the player's move is to keep your crossbow unloaded.
I hunt my prey without my crossbow ready to go, of course, at all times.
All right. So to address all these issues, they added a martial crossbow.
Okay.
The Arbalest.
Damien says D8 to D10.
So that you can expect a more reasonable damage output without having to pay a feat tax. While we had the patient open on crossbows, we also adjusted them to make them their own weapon group with a damage-oriented critical specialization.
What were they before?
Bows, I think.
Okay.
Because a crossbow bolt and an arrow are kind of the same thing, right?
I think your dad would have strong words with you about that.
Well, now they give you D8 persistent bleed damage plus additional bleed damage equal to the weapon's item bonus to attack rolls. So that means at level 1, you do D8 persistent bleed damage. But at level 20, you do D8 plus 3 persistent bleed damage. Look at that scaling.
Yeah, we haven't changed that part.
But
That's
don't know.
disappointing. And
They might have.
The funny thing is they just said they didn't.
That's what it says it does.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what it says it does.
great.
Like 3d8, if it was based on rune, would have been cool because persistent bleed is not nothing.
No, persistent bleed's fine.
Creatures melt really quick.
Yeah.
3d8 would have been okay, 1 per rune.
I love the idea that when it is kind of funny though. It's like when you get critically hit with a bow, it pins you to the surface.
Right.
But when you get critically hit with a crossbow, you bleed.
Right.
Which implies that you don't bleed when you get
anything else.
Right. And it also implies that the crossbow bolt won't pin you to the surface.
Right.
So it's like, what's the physics on that? That is that prescriptive.
Which is really
that is
funny.
the prescriptive versus descriptive discretion.
But also, like, a crossbow typically has like more like force, so it's more likely to pin you to a wall and not bleed because it's like going through you so fast. There isn't much of an opening.
Honestly, I think a crossbow bolt is probably more likely just to fuck you up in general.
Well,
but
I'm just saying, like compared to a arrow, which has enough force to basically hit your rib,
yeah,
right? Like to actually pin you on a wall with an arrow that a dude pulled back. Like, think about that for a moment. That is a lot of draw strength.
yeah. No,
versus
I mean,
just like a crossbow, which is got.
I don't even want to go into this.
Yeah.
That again, this is where prescriptive versus descriptive languages. They're calling it an arbalist, which, as Damien points out, it costs 12 gold, which means that your level 1 character is going to have a hard time buying this. But arbalists were a real life thing that required a 2-handed winch to load.
Which isn't what this
looks
is.
like it's
though,
one-handed. I'm looking at the
Oh,
picture.
it's a one-handed wrench. Yeah.
Looks like
Why
it's
is it 12 gold? Like what?
Because this one's better. It's one action
Better
reload
than what?
than the regular heavy crossbow.
Wait, does this say that it has backstabber?
Yeah, this one, but that's the martial weapon one. If you look at just a regular heavy crossbow and simple weapons, that's the normal one people are going to go with.
It does say backstabber.
So wait, what? The crossbow has backstabber, which I know triggers when they're flat-footed. But what?
And it's, yeah.
I'm sorry, off guard. That is very strange.
Rock and stone.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. With the basic damage outlay on crossbows addressed via the core weapon system. So basically, again, this is what I was talking about before. If you're their problem is they wanted to include a lot of variety.
Yeah.
But then you have two options, which is either make shit that's bad and live with it,
Right.
or create feat taxes that make it better, or make everything the same. And this is an example of them just making everything. Well, no, because now it's like, oh, well, I want to use a crossbow. Well, this is the crossbow that you're going to use. Why would anyone use any other crossbow other than this?
There's really no other option.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming they're getting rid of the feed or.
Yeah, I mean, someone points out the heavy
changed it,
the heavy crossbow has reload 2. No one in their right mind will ever use that.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah, I agree, Shredded Swipe. Anyways, also, you know, the crossbow can only fit. Oh no, never mind. They're all just 10 bolts and 10 arrows. Anyways, with the basic damage fixed, we were able to make reloading more fun and tactical with the feat space that was opened up. So basically, they're like, now you don't have to take this feat. So now you could take this feat.
Right.
In addition to
You're in the class design because you don't have a man.
in addition to options like the Warden's Reload feat, you know, the one that comes in at level 16.
Yeah,
We've also reworked Crossbow Ace and other similar options to function more like the Gunslinger's reload capabilities, which they get for free, giving you additional things that you can do to reinforce your playstyle with reload weapons while improving your ability to achieve the kind of cinematic tactical maneuvering.
Tactical maneuvering.
So, okay.
That needs to go on a shirt or something.
So I like that idea of a shirt. Let's take a look at Crossbow Ace. You're wielding a crossbow with a reload of 1 or higher. So you're wielding an arbalist probably.
Or heavy crossbow.
Right, but all right. Your deep understanding of the crossbow allows you to reload efficiently while moving yourself out of the line of return fire. Either create a diversion or take cover, then interact to reload. As normal, you must meet the requirements to take cover. You must be prone, benefiting from cover, or near a feature that allows you to take cover.
I like this.
I don't hate this. Yeah. I actually like this a lot.
It's a level 1 feat, which is nice, and it kind of speaks into that.
This is one of those.
Economy.
This feels like this would be a cool moment.
Yeah,
where your character's able to, you know,
and ironically, it's cinematically cool.
And
right? I can see it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, maybe it's not as cool as we thought it was. I love the idea of just, you know, you're like, now to be fair also, I mean, that makes a lot of sense too. You're like, oh man, I just shot my crossbow and I've got to fucking winch this thing.
Yeah, you would take cover.
You would take cover.
So, that does actually make a lot of sense.
Right.
Yeah, I like this feat.
No, and again, I also feel like it's, I mean, I hate to say it, but it does feel like cinematic tactical maneuvering. Yeah. Because it feels like something you'd see in the movie.
It's definitely the new thing now. Cinematic tactical maneuvering.
So, you know.
CTM'd up this bitch.
So again, I like this. And here's the other thing, this does not feel like a feat tax. Because you don't have to take this. to be good
Right.
with a crossbow.
Right. And you're not always going to like take cover.
Right. Like if this said you can hunt prey and reload your crossbow at the same
You would
time,
take it on.
you would take this every single time.
Yeah.
And what's creative diversion? Is that the feint to make them flat-footed?
Not sure. I don't ever create
That sounds
diversions.
right. How to play this fucking game. Here we're all like,
We're all going to archive a method. I believe it is.
It's an action with a gesture or trick, some distracting words. You can create diversion and draws a creature's
It's
attention.
deception. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. You make a DC versus their perception, and if you succeed, you become hidden
Yeah.
to the creature. This lasts until the end of your turn. Yeah. Okay. Which allows you to potentially hide or side or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I think that's pretty cool.
This is cool. I like this feat. I like the design of this feat.
I like the design of this feat too.
I think this fits into like
And it's one action.
good feats.
So
right?
it's also an action improver.
Yeah.
Because you're getting 2 actions. You're getting now, granted, it does say you interact to reload the thing, but it's 1 action. And it has to be reload 1 or higher.
I was
so
wondering about
if
that.
you have a heavy crossbow, which has a reload of 2,
Right. Does this make heavy crossbows worthwhile now?
does it mean that you can reload as a single action?
Right.
With the crossbow ace. Now, granted, looking at the chart, a heavy crossbow does D10 and the arbalist does
D10.
D10.
But it'll let you 1 reload.
But the
Action.
arbalist has a backstabber and the heavy crossbow does not. So the arbalist is still a better
Oh,
weapon.
by far.
Sure. This is really an issue that you're level 1 and you can't.
Although the heavy crossbow has a 120-foot range and the
10
arbalist
feet.
only has 110.
Well, fights occur in 15-foot rooms, so neither of those matter.
Somebody, Aeon Rider says, "Oh, so that's how you backstab with an arbalist." I'm going to jump behind this pillar.
That's a good
What's
point.
going on back there?
What's that ticking sound?
The creative diversion is where they look at you with their mouth wide open that they can't believe somebody's fucking reloading a crossbow in the middle of a combat.
Correct.
Do you realize that in
Can't believe this guy's doing this right
I
now.
know, they're like, this guy must be an absolute badass.
Yeah.
For him to, do you realize that in real? Do you realize that in medieval combat, crossbowmen either carried their own or there was a different soldier
Yeah,
who
usually, yeah.
who had a big, huge portable shield
Yeah.
that they would set up on the battlefield because they understood that you're going to be vulnerable as shit
Right.
for the 30 seconds to 40 seconds it's going to take you to reload your stupid crossbow.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now it's cinematic.
Now it's in my mind. It is 100%. There's a clip of bolts, and it is a pump action crossbow.
Pump action.
When you take crossbow ace, it becomes a pump action crossbow, and you're just like, time to kick ass and chew bubble gum.
So
and I'm all out of bubble
Lil
gum.
says if you have kip up, you can drop prone for free, take cover and reload, kip up if needed and shoot. Is that, I guess it's true.
Any case, I don't. Yeah, that seems like a little weird one.
It's kind of funny.
But he's like, so Michael says this. So that's everything I got for you on the Ranger. Thanks for tuning in and stay tuned for upcoming what it looks like.
Skip a section. I swore there was something earlier.
No, they talk about the Grievous rune
Yeah.
and how if you really still want to be able to shoot people with your bow,
Yeah. Oh, this was interesting. That it lets you kind of swap out the weapon traits and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this gets to what you were saying about everything's the same.
Everything's the same.
They couldn't commit, so they're like, well, we don't want to piss you guys off, so make your crossbow a bow. That's a crossbow.
Right, because they're like, what about all the people who go, but I like shooting people to stick them to the wall with my crossbow. They're like, never fear. Everything is the same in this game.
This is
No decision you make is actually
These articles and
consequential.
things like this are trauma response from the feedback from the PF2 playtest.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, I think in general, I don't disagree with what they're saying. I mean, in fact, a lot of the things that we would bitch about, then they would, granted, it started off by saying there's nothing wrong with this class at all, and then proceeded to, in numerous paragraphs, illustrate why this was a problem,
major class
or
flaws,
its flaws about the feat tax and all this other stuff. So, I mean, in that respect of it's it's probably just messaging.
Yeah, when you separated PR stuff, I don't hate anything.
No,
here.
I think it's actually a pretty interesting. I mean, I do hate that Warden's Reload's a level 16.
That
too.
is-
That doesn't just
I'm not
make
even
sense.
trying to say that it should be level 1, right? Because you wouldn't even have probably a Warden spell that low. But this to me feels more like a level 6.
Anything
8
after
feet.
10 needs to be ridiculous because you're not even really playing.
I mean, think about. We just read the Kineticist. We did that 6-hour stream. Those level 16 feats are you're summoning a sun.
Yeah.
What are we
Summon
talking
a sun or reload. Your choice.
Yeah. So. Let's see. Wojo Fizz says, feels like their talk is also part of them trying to say it's a remaster, not a new version.
Yeah, I agree with that.
100%. I definitely agree with that.
They're really going to try to die on that hill.
Yeah, because
That's just coming from corporate, right? They're like,
I
make
don't-
sure you say.
Corporate, I mean.
no, but I don't understand why. I guess maybe people had a much worse reaction to 3.5 than I remember there being. But 3.5 came out after 3 years of third edition.
Yeah.
And in my personal opinion, the more I see this, there are more changes in this game than there was in 3.0 to 3.5.
I agree. I mean, how do you realistically?
And I don't care about that, but I cannot stress this enough. I've stressed this to all of you. When 3.5 came out, everyone who'd been playing third edition for a while knew there were some certain issues, and there were certain things that they fixed that I don't necessarily think need to be fixed.
Sure.
But they said it's not a new edition; it is compatible, and it was in theory.
In theory.
And not a single person I know ever used any of their old books ever again.
This is less compatible, right?
That is my yes.
Like all the terminology has been changed. They stripped out all that stuff. They stripped out some major things. The Wizards getting a major rework. Like, how do you sit down in December with your new shiny copy of Remaster and play with like a Kineticist, the new Ranger, and like, I don't know, the Crusader from the core rulebook from 2019? Like how do you play in that same group? How do you run
Well,
the circus at AP?
Well, the example I gave is, I mean, let's say you pick up the game for the first time in 2024, and you're like, oh, this game is sweet. I love Pathfinder 2. Yeah. I got Player Core. I was at the bookstore, and I saw a book on the shelf that said Player Core, and I thought, that is very compelling. That is going to make me buy that book because it says Player Core, because that is a really good name.
Great name.
It actually says Player Core 1. Wow, hype. There's another one coming. Anyways, they go and they buy it and they go, oh, this is cool. I like circuses. I'm going to go pick up this adventure path. Yeah. And they go and play it.
You know what? I think I'm going to be a wizard, so I'll also get Secrets of Magic.
No, not even that. You're playing Extinction Curse and you're like, oh yeah, because it says it's completely compatible. And then you just learned how to play Pathfinder 2. And they play this adventure path and they're talking about things like flat-footed.
Yeah.
And you go, I don't know what that is. And they talk about, and you're like, is that the same thing as Off Guard, or is that something different? What does that mean?
Right.
And then they're like, the third level spell. You're like, I don't know what that means.
Right.
And they talk about creatures' alignment, and you're like, I don't know what that means.
Also, the spell names changed.
Also, all the spell names change. And you're like, I feel like if you learn how to play Pathfinder 2 next year for the first time, you will not be able to use any of these books.
But that means you have to buy their new.
Well, of course, yes, of course.
Which fine. That's not actually an issue for like us. I'm sure some people complain about it. Listen, I like buying role playing books, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is like we're just in denial about the whole thing. Just like re-release this shit.
They just don't want to piss off people, I think.
Of course.
They are going to piss off people though, because it's not going to work.
No, but that's the thing is it does work.
Is it?
Somehow.
Your scenario right there is one that's going to happen. It's going to be frustrating.
And I will be shouted down in the comments of this very video.
Yeah, you're right.
But you don't get any views.
And Reddit will be like, of course it totally makes sense. It's totally fine. Off Guard is way better.
Yeah. We got a super chat in from Vin.
Yep.
It says, finally out of work meetings, what's the TLDR on the Ranger? Well, the answer, Vin, is... it looks like they are acknowledging that there are certain core issues with the class, even though they said...
even though they deny that there's core issues with the class.
They started off by saying that this is one class that, to be fair... Well, they said, by and large, this is one of the classes that most people consider to be solid and effective.
That's true. That's a great point.
They're not saying that they think that.
You know what, Mike? I apologize if you happen to ever watch this, because you could just be calling everyone else an idiot, which I agree with.
You're like, now I'm actually on board.
I was like, there's a little deception in there. Right? I was like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing here.
Right. Because you say that. You say that.
Yeah, he didn't say they felt that way.
Right. He's saying that, a lot of people consider this
and
to be...
think about it. We're not inclined to fix things that aren't broken, right? But then everything else in this article is about them fixing it, right?
Things that are broken.
Right.
Right.
No, he didn't say it was broken.
Right. Exactly.
And he said everyone else thought it wasn't broken, but then they fixed it, which means it is broken.
Right, because then they go into here and they talk about how the spell casting fundamentally didn't work.
Right, like completely just didn't work.
They talked about how Ranger snares were a complete miss.
Yep, deleted.
They talked about feat taxes.
Yep.
They talked about how these things don't have, about how it created problems with the play loop.
You literally can't use a bow.
How the bow and the crossbow didn't work well together. Yeah, so I mean...
What's left of the Ranger at this point?
Well, they didn't really talk here about much about what Hunt Prey is going to do. And we heard... I saw something in the chat that somebody said that they're going to try try to remove the reliance on hunt prey. But
If
that,
they said that,
That's
it's
what
not.
Damien
In the
said.
but it's
I don't
not.
know if
It's
that's-
not even so much about the reliance on hunt prey. It's just making
make it
it
interesting.
making it interesting, making it a compelling option. That's what I think is really interesting.
Damien sent me the Spells and Spellcasting Remastered article that came out 2 weeks ago.
This is about the Ranger,
No, I'm just letting you know I have that now. I must have missed it.
but I don't know where we are with actually our tip goals, but I don't think we reached them. So.
No, they're halfway, I think.
All right, yeah. So, we're on the what we like to call here the downside of of our channel nowadays.
The cooler side of the pillow.
Yes. So,
No, I think it's the other thing that's kind of in the way.
no, I can see it. It's
Oh, okay, there you go.
31 and 30.
Yep.
So yeah, lately, we've been spending a lot of time on this channel talking about a variety of games, Fabula Ultima, Call of Cthulhu, Fantasy Age, and
like Damien said, going on Pies' website to
and-
get the link crashed my YouTube.
yeah. And so, we haven't been getting as many viewers as we recently have, but hopefully, there are some interesting concepts coming out for Pathfinder 2 here with the remaster and everything like that. So,
Which we will be reviewing.
yeah. Talk about it.
I'm sure after the Dust Cells remaster is going to be a great update to the edition. So I'm really looking forward to it. But my biggest concern is, the editing. I mean, Rage of Elements, I think it was their first time, but it really suffered from the slapdash, let's update everything to remaster verbiage.
Oh, you mean like all the naming? I don't.
The naming, the words, the fact that they still had nested traits. It was, you could read that book and it definitely felt it was in between.
Yeah,
right?
That's going to be natural. I mean, that's.
And it was the first one, and
Yeah.
it was already in pre-production and all that. So I get it, but it's just not something that these guys have been particularly strong with in general. And there's just a lot to get right to not complicate this. And so that's my one big concern is it's not even hope they get the witch right or stuff like that. I like in general the new philosophy that they have for their class designs. I'm less concerned about some things. I'm sure there's going to be things I still don't like. It's really just that presentation and that.
The last couple classes have been really nice.
They've gotten a lot better at the class design, but rewriting all this terminology and remember how that company works, right? You got a couple core guys sitting there and then just a lot of freelancers, right? And a lot of our specific issues in early PF2 is really just the freelancers trying to learn this game and making assumptions that it was PF1 when it wasn't at all, right? You're gonna see that again with this remaster, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like having to relearn. You're gonna see things slip through or whatever that kind of didn't.
And it's already a complicated game,
right?
So that's my one concern. I'm sure in a year past we'll be past it, but it's going to be bumpy road until then.
We got a super chat from Luke who said, "Is this a problem with Paizo's methodology? Everything is free online. Community is helpful on Reddit and Discord. People will not learn in a vacuum."
Not wrong.
No, you're not wrong, but also
some people won't reach out though.
Well, but I just think also, look at this. Look at the problem this way, Luke. Right? Because this is not a new edition, okay? Your Archives of Nethys, your Path Builder are going to, update. Right? This is like you being like, I don't want to upgrade to Windows 11.
Right.
And they're like, well, we're no longer supporting Windows 10, so your computer won't turn on unless you update.
It's even worse than that. If you rely on archives, you don't have a choice.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah.
Is there's literally not a way for you to play if you rely on these digital tools.
Yeah, you have to actually use the books.
So you are just 100% priced into that. But my point is, when they make that switch, if you're online and you're using Archives of Nethys, is there a way for you to figure out what flat-footed means?
They might have. Will they have
that will be a translation?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So does that mean when I learn the game now, because everything's backwards compatible,
Yes.
I have to learn the entire game,
Yes.
but then also learn what all of those terms used to be,
Yep.
If you're going to run something before,
which means it's not fucking compatible.
well, I agree with you there. But
When the hurdle's that high, don't call it, and that's fine. Don't call it compatible.
Yeah.
I think they're so afraid that people are gonna lose their fucking. I think they're just so. I think what fucked them. I think what's fucking me with us is that PF2, the OGL, the explosion, because everyone went out and bought stuff for this game,
I think you're right.
and they suddenly realized if we even make it seem for a half a moment that this is a new edition.
Cash grab.
They're like, we will
They sold
be.
so many PF2 core.
They
books.
sold so many PF2 books. And so I think that they need to they were like, we need to do everything in our power to make it seem like this is not a new edition. Otherwise, we will burn all the goodwill.
Yeah, but they obviously they have legal pressure. Like for all of their bravado, and kudos to Paizo for standing up to the big meanie Wizards of the Coast. But like for all their bravado, clearly the best legal advice they got was, you strip that shit out of your game right now.
Right.
Because they hauled ass to rip all of the OGL stuff out.
Right.
And so to your point,
But
I don't think they want to do it, but I also think that they're not willing to risk not doing it.
Yeah, but at the same time, Wizards of the Coast ended up backing down and they released everything to Creative Commons. Honestly, the orc is kind of pointless now. I'm just in this particular instance, it is.
It might not be in the future, but we don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, if you want to make stuff for 6th edition or whatever like that. But in terms of the core set that Pathfinder 2, but I mean, whatever. They talked about wanting to break free of the shackles of the OG, which is fine. I actually think that's totally fine. But what I'm saying is when Paizo did that.
I mean, long term, I think it's good for the
when
game.
Paizo did that, I don't think they were thinking we're going to suddenly sell whatever, I don't even know how many millions.
It's sold out of all their books. They had to reprint.
I'm sure that they never thought for a moment that this was going to lead to that level of uptick in sales.
Yeah.
So I think that they were suddenly like, oh, this is a great opportunity. It's been 3 years. 3 to 4 years. Everybody in the industry knows you kind of do a new edition every 3 to 4 years. We'll strip out the orc stuff. We'll strip out the OGL stuff. We'll clean up the game. We'll make a nice little Pathfinder 2.5. Oh, hey, all of our books sold out. Shit. Get that messaging out there quick. This is not a new edition. This is not a new edition. This is not a new edition. It's going to be complete. The game remains the same. And yeah.
We got another super chat.
Oh, we did from John No. Let alone the rage over the new 5.5. I think they have been worried about. Yeah, again, the rate.
At this point, 5.5 is going to be more 5.0 than this is going to be to 2.0.
Well, right, because they've gotten so beat back by the feedback of that.
They went way back.
We'll fix Lucky and call it a day.
But the crazy thing about 5.5 is, I'm trying to remember when I started playtesting 5th edition. 2012, 2013,
yeah,
2012.
Castle of something inspired.
Dragon Spear Castle was the very, very earliest beta of 5th edition.
Yeah.
I think that came out 2013 or 2014 or something.
Was it that late? Does that mean years after 4E come out?
4E came out in 2008.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
And so I think they started talking about 5th edition in 2012, give or take. And I think 5E kind of officially came out 2014, maybe. My point is 5E's been out for damn near 8-9 years.
Yeah. And
what? I mean,
never had a true 5.5.
The time between 2nd edition and 3rd edition was 10.
Yeah, 2013.
Yeah, so there you go. It's been 10 years. The fact that there hasn't been a new edition of D&D is ridiculous.
I mean, at this point, they're just paralyzed.
Right. Well, we said this before. They were making all this money. Number one, so why
do it?
Why risk it?
Why fix what's broken? The Ranger.
Why fix what's broken? And then secondly, I think they never understood. I still don't think they understand why their game was popular.
I agree with that.
And because they didn't understand it, they said, we're not going to mess with it.
Well, ironically, they didn't make it popular.
Correct. Right. They had nothing to do with the sales and the popularity of their game, which is a really awkward place to be in.
Oh, yeah. It's really tough.
Yeah. Dr. Metropolis says, so when's the Symbaroum stream happening? Well, Bob, you stole my copy of Symbaroum.
I mean, I stole it. You gave it to me to
read. I
read.
didn't give it to you. I gave it to you to read, which is equivalent to you stealing it.
That is not close to being the word stealing.
No, I mean in the sense that if I have to wait till you read it, I'll never get it back.
You'll never get it back.
Right.
I'm into the player character creation section, so I'm halfway through.
Okay.
Again, I'm getting to actually the mechanics. It took me forever to get through the lore. It was dark and slow. And,
right.
So,
I'm still kind of on the fence about the whole dark Nordic thing.
It was okay.
Yeah. Symbaroum, there's another one that's very similar to Symbaroum. What is the other one that's similar to Symbaroum? It's
we were talking about this last.
It's another dark, evil
Vaesen.
Forest. Vaesen.
Which I played.
Yeah, Vaesen's the other one. Yeah.
I guess I have this weird attraction to it, but then I read it and I'm like, maybe I don't.
Right.
In theory, I think I like it.
Are you guys reviewing the 5e version of it? Because apparently that just officially launched.
Oh, wow. Let's see. John No had, I have intelligent conversations that came out. I have intelligent conversations that came out after 5e.
With people that came out after 5e.
Oh, with people that came out after 5e. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's, I mean, we on this channel, we have said many, many times, we don't hate 5th edition. It's not been our favorite edition of the game. But, you know, again, actually, we were talking about this before we went live.
I think I like it more than 2nd.
Ooh, that's a great question. I probably do too. 5th edition was designed for kind of old, bitter, grognard, I just want to go into a dungeon and I want to explore and get treasure and loot like the old days kind of player that kind of like we are.
Yeah.
You know, 5th edition was kind of designed for like me and Aaron and Ben, right? Like old people who grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons the way Gary intended it. And then saw 3rd edition and 4th edition and were like, this is all this modern crap. Get all this stuff out of my D&D. I'm done with the system. And then D&D was like, we're so sorry. You know, there's no chance that our hobby is ever going to grow because we can never compete with the video games. So here's 5th edition, a love letter.
Made by 4 people.
Here, a love letter back to you old gamers. And look at this, a very, very minimalist rule set. All the feats and all that crazy gizmos are either not there or they're optional. The game is going to rely on rulings more than rules. Yeah. And it's very much like an homage to the old school experience. And then
the show.
It blew up and no one used it for that.
Well, yeah, there's multiple issues there. You know, we talked before the show and like the original design of 5e, the one that Monty Cook was working on, you and I loved it because it was designed to be modular. It was like, hey, you like 4th edition? Plug in this module. You like 3rd? Plug in feats. You like just basic? Don't plug in that shit. And here you go. Ramp up the difficulty. Like it was basically like D&D in a box, and that, right? You know, build it how you want.
They're coming out with a new Gary book. Isn't that what Dungeon Craft talked about today?
His estate has been in weird probate issues, and they're finally like resolving them. And apparently, some of his manuscripts are now going to be able to be printed. Some of them have already been printed.
That's what I was hearing. I listened to that video today. It's interesting.
Yeah. So, but so it's more of a reprint.
Yeah.
But do you own Necropolis?
I don't think so.
Okay. I don't think I do either. But apparently it's like Gary's like magnum opus.
Okay. I have his other one, Castle
Zagig. And that's one of the ones that they're reprinting, but I'm like, it already came out. It's just they haven't had the license to print it for like 20 years. Yeah. Doormat says, our set looks amazing. Nicely done.
Also, Vin said, skip through the video, not surprised with the news. Sounds like the world needs Nightfinder.
Yeah, so what Vin is talking about there with Nightfinder is just the idea. Now, again, there's no guarantee here. But we had started kind of on our Patreon, our Discord. And again, we're passionate about these games. I wouldn't be sitting here talking about this game if I didn't enjoy it, if I didn't care about it. Don't get it wrong. Don't get it twisted.
But we don't hate this. We're just critical.
Yeah, we're just critical.
We're honest.
Right, we're critical roles. Anyways, but yes, if you're interested in being part of these conversations on a more daily basis, you should definitely join our Patreon, patreon.com/nightslastcall, because that will get you access to our Discord, and our Discord is where most of the heart of these conversations happen. So, Beowulf, take care, buddy. Try to fix that Patreon issue so you don't get kicked out. Or you already
technically kicked out.
He already got kicked out.
Yeah,
so.
I was wondering where he went. Like one day, I was like, I thought he was just talking the other day about the ship on Traveler, and then now I didn't see him.
Well, yeah, Beowulf's been pretty popular in the Discord. Very post a lot is what I would say. Any case, but yes, we have a Patreon that we would love to have you in if you want to discuss not just Pathfinder 2nd Edition, but gaming as a concept and philosophy. Get into great discussions like what is a game, but of course,
what is fun.
But of course, if you know our track record, we have a lot of other games that we talk about, and there's a lot of opportunities to play games as well. So yeah, that would be pretty sweet. But one of the things that we talked about was, and is an ongoing conversation, is what are some of the elements of Pathfinder 2 that if we were to create Pathfinder, like if we were to create a Pathfinder 3 or people in our, because I mean, I'm not trying to say that we have the best Pathfinder 2 players in the entire Pathfinder 2 community, but I think we do. Like with these people play more Pathfinder 2nd edition and at a higher level
in 1 month than I play in my lifetime.
I mean, they play and think about this game, and like I like to think.
How many Northern Reaches games did we have in the past week or so?
16 was last week. 16 games last week.
Right.
The week before that was 11.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, these are people who play
average between like 2 to 8 hours.
8 hours has been not big anymore, but like 2 to 6 now.
2 to 6.
Yeah. 4 hours still the mainstream.
So the point is, you know, we have a lot of people. There's only so much Pathfinder 2 a person can play, but we but we have people who are out there playing 2 or 3 or 4 games of Pathfinder 2 a week. So anyways, the point is we have a really big resource. So we asked them, like, and we're talking, what are the things that you dislike about Pathfinder 2, or what would you change if you were to make the game? And so there's kind of this idea of what people have called Night Finder, which would be like, how would we design Pathfinder, you know, 2 or Pathfinder 3?
I hate to interrupt, but
my thing was, I said, well, we are going to wait until the Remaster comes out because I want to give Paizo the chance to basically say, you know what, Derek, you don't need to fix anything.
It'd be a waste of time.
You don't need to chase any. You don't need why even think about it until we see where the game is at. So that's kind of where
we'll threw a big $20. He just got his kid to bed, but he goes late to the party. But I got to ask for the recap. Remastered Ranger, yay or nay?
I will say this.
Information to say yay or nay yet.
I will say this. We do not have enough information yet. However, despite some of the PR wording, they do seem to be aware of some of the play issues that are endemic to the Ranger, notably around feat taxes, maybe certain action economy issues, as well as scaling issues across weapons and spells, and they do seem like they're trying to address those. And one of the examples feat that they gave us, the level 1 Crossbow Ace, which lets you reload and create a diversion or take cover instead, seems very cool. And we were kind of mocking tactical cinematic movement.
Yeah,
cinematic tactical
maneuvering,
cinematic tactical maneuvering.
Yeah,
we were kind of mocking it, but
CMT.
But we all agreed actually that kind of feels like cinematic tactical maneuvering, and so they kind of actually delivered on that. So
and it's also kind of like, how do you describe PF2? Yeah, cinematic tactical maneuvering.
Yeah, so I think that'd be pretty cool. Are they planning to continue to make animal? They did not mention animal companions in the slightest. Right. I know that animal companion scaling sucks, and the game basically rapidly falls off.
John also did a super chat.
Oh, John also had a super chat. KOLC dice would be awesome merch, just saying. So
we have in the hopper.
We do. We had some initial designs from Chessex. I wasn't super thrilled with what options they gave us, but I also love Chessex dice.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, you know, is the juice worth the squeeze to try to go find another vendor that could potentially deliver it to us?
No, I want Chessex.
You should see if Game Science will do it.
But the real problem was that you couldn't do D20. Chessex doesn't do custom D20s. And like part of the fun, I think, of having a KOLC dice would be to have a KOLC symbol on the 20. Yeah. But they don't do that. They only do D10 and D6. And I'm like, who needs the D10s? So then I was thinking, okay, well, we can do the cube of whatever it is. Is it 12? I think D6.
Yeah.
You know, and we'll just get 6. You get 12 orange, magenta
to go play your PBTA games.
Yeah, and then the 6-sider, which is obviously a much bigger space, so you can get a little bit more detail. We'll have our logo on it, you know. And I thought that would be a fine.
That's
option.
the way I would go.
And that way too, you can 12 dice for your fireball or your cone of cold or whatever. But in terms of doing a full polyhedral set, it just didn't feel like it made any sense because it would only be the D6 and the D10, which is weird.
Yeah, I would just get D6s.
So I was like, do I want to find a place that does custom
I'm surprised
D20s?
that they do custom dice at all, and then I'm kind of surprised that they were going to do custom dice. They didn't do a good job with
The nice thing about their custom dice is they are actually engraved.
That's what I
That's one of the things about Chessex. Like when they do your symbol, it actually is like, engraved in the surface of the die and then painted.
Yeah, that's what I'd
not backfilled though, so the weight distribution is off. So I might have missed some chat here, but yeah. So long story short, I think that look, if we're talking amongst friends here, I would want them to burn the system to the ground and rebuild it from the ground up.
Fair enough.
But I mean,
well, okay. I guess
I don't think there's like.
Is the question make a better Pathfinder or is it make a role playing game?
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Well, what is Pathfinder.
What is a role play?
Well, I'm saying like if you look at PF2, which
Like what niche does Pathfinder 2 fill?
Cinematic tactical maneuvering with a strong nod towards balance sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like a more hardcore D&D player
No,
What's
really
hardcore mean?
I wouldn't say that.
that wants like more math.
Well,
If you like math,
There's a lot of math.
data driven people. And that's
a lot of people call it Math Finder, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, undoubtedly, and I don't. This is not a knock against the game. Pathfinder 2 is very appealing to the person who wants to,
numbers go burr.
path build.
Yeah.
That's what they should do.
Because like if when I played Warhammer, I used to play with our buddy Larry, and he loved just sitting there with the books and just like making army lists. Oh, tweak this, give this guy a plasma rifle, but give this plane an autocannon, just like these little micro tweaks over an entire group. I never cared about that. Pathfinder 2.
I'm literally just trying to build minis.
Right. Pathfinder 2, if you look at 5th edition, you're like, okay, so I make a couple choices at level 1 and 2, and then even when I get to make a choice between a feat, then I'm giving up my ability score improvement, which is important.
Right.
So I guess I don't really, it's not really. Whereas Pathfinder 2 is like, here's 40 feat choices.
Yeah. Well, they do a decent job breaking it up, right? Like, here's 40. You only have to make 1 of 3 right now.
No, I know, but that's what I'm saying though. But like when people sit down to path build,
oh yeah, they just go through.
They go, okay, I'm gonna make this level 20 character.
No, I mean, I think like not to be a dick, but like, yeah, you want to build a better Pathfinder, sure, yeah, okay. It's all virtual. You link up Path Builder, right? And when your character's complete, it runs to an auto player through an AP.
Like an auto battler?
Yeah.
Like Hearthstone?
Yeah,
or...
but like tied into like an actual AP with all the narrative fluff. And what's cool is when you beat an encounter, that's when you get the background lore that normally only the GM gets to read. So now you get to experience the trauma behind what's her name in Plaguestone, who was like the 16-year-old alchemist girl who was super angsty and wanted to burn the town down for some reason.
I don't remember.
See, as a player, I don't know why she wanted to do that, but Derek does hold the knowledge to this, right? But if you had an auto battler after you built your PF2 character,
Does your perks, your rewards?
you could be like, oh, sweet, I beat her. What happened? Why was she like this?
When you think about it, that's just the natural evolution, right? Because
I'm not really joking.
No, because already like people are like, oh, I couldn't even play Pathfinder in real life. I'd have to roll those dice myself and add up all those numbers, and I could never keep track of all those multiple attack penalties and circumstance bonuses. And you're like, okay, what about the next step where you don't even play the combat?
What if I told you I do this? What you're talking about right now? So I play MLB Showdown, which is a dice rolling baseball card game, but they have built stuff on the websites where now you can build your team,
right?
And then you put it into
what
auto
happens.
generators, and then you just click play, and it
Yeah.
just rolls the dice constantly. And you could obviously play, or you can let it roll, and then you get your stats at the end of the game.
That's
You
what
go to the
PF2
next
players
game.
want.
And I do it all the time
Like for your games.
for my games, and then I see what my stats are for the end of the season, and then I go to the next season when everyone's ready, and I build my new team, and that's what I do. I click generate, and it just goes and takes a couple minutes to roll the dice and goes through all that.
So
And I
We'll have
actually,
a little leaderboard too, like
and that's what
who
it is.
cleared it faster.
and I get like my home run totals. Am I beating that guy? Am I? I mean, I didn't do anything, but am I winning? And so I kind of like it. I don't know. I'll tell you, when you say natural progression, I don't think you're actually wrong.
Okay. All right. John No says KOLC dice would be awesome merch. Just saying. Thank you, John No. Save Versus says dice of last call. Let's go.
Yep.
The hype, Bob.
That's right.
And then Mr. Blotfest says check roll for initiative for custom dice. All right. I will check them out, Mr. Blotface, because again, I'd love to do a 7-set polyhedral, but it just didn't seem worth it with Chessex because you're basically just getting Chessex game side dice with a.
If Chessex is making rules like that, they're too big for little guys like us.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it wasn't like horribly expensive.
Yeah, but you could tell it's very like processed.
But
right?
they don't do. I don't think they do D20 for anybody. That's what I'm saying. I think when
they
people,
make D20s.
I think,
Just
yeah. But I think
roll
when
for
people get
initiatives,
custom
like,
D20s, I think like they're going to like they have their own manufacturing.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like I don't think they do it for anyone because they've like made it for like mass scale.
Yeah,
And that's the sort of
this
thing a
site
big
is
company
literally
does.
it's like rather than a custom dice sets or singles, any shape, no minimums. Choose from dozens of colors, special events.
Super cheap, full of
organized-
hype.
I mean, it just seems like it's exactly what you're kind of talking about.
I somebody asked a question in the chat, and unfortunately it scrolled past us here. Something
Oh,
about
I can tell you what it is.
about what's the question about the swashbuckler?
Let me see here.
Give me my monster over there, Smith?
I don't see swashbuckler. Oh, here it is. You discussed the not
We'll scroll
great.
down so that I
You discussed the not great feat action tax the Ranger has. Would you like something more close to the swashbuckler, which has some action tax, but it pays greater damage / roleplay dividends?
Doesn't everyone hate getting panache?
I've heard a lot of complaints about panache. That basically your character sucks unless you have panache,
Everyone goes for panache.
and then you just immediately go for panache, and then the finishers are great unless you miss, in which case your life sucks.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
So
I will say this. I do think the swashbuckler and the way that they interact with panache is more interesting
it's a step in the right direction.
than than the hunt prey aspect. So yeah. Self-confessed Leonard says feat taxes suck and action taxes suck. Well, again, we have to understand, what does a tax mean, right? Because by that definition, like, anything in the game that costs 2 actions sucks, right? Any 2 action activity sucks.
I think a tax is something that you have to get back to par.
Right.
Right. I mean,
Well, all right.
one of the few criticisms we actually have for like 4th edition
Yeah.
was that in the early
Yes.
books, they had a mistake in the math. And then in the later books, they're like, shit, players are kind of under optimized at Paragon and Epic. So let's introduce these feats to add a +1 to like their tax and stuff. And I think their saves to get them back on par. And this was historically considered a bad move.
Yeah, they were
because
called
this was a feat tax.
they were called the feat taxes. Yeah, for sure.
You had to take this feat because attack is king.
Right.
And
Right. Well, that's the issue. You didn't need to. It's not like the game didn't function.
well, technically, your character just got weaker as it leveled up based on the math of the game.
100%. But maybe that is a fine way. You could have had the game and have it be designed that way.
Sure.
I'm just saying, like, the problem is that when you make an option that is so compelling, I think the feat tax to me is different than something that, like, because while we called that a feat tax, to me that's more of like, this is so good.
Oh,
why wouldn't you take it?
I think PF2 is far more grievous than that because I agree with you. Also, the math in 40 was a little bit looser.
Yeah.
So it's not going to kill you. But like some of these feats are like, if you don't have this, your class doesn't work.
And that's where it's problematic.
That should just be a chassis option.
Yeah. And I agree, Loth. Panache needing a hard DC is hard. I don't think anything in the game should be requiring, hard DCs. I think it's like, that's what your character does. In fact, we had a swashbuckler and he always took you first just to guarantee that he get panache. And it didn't take any actions. He just had to go last in the initiative, but it didn't really matter.
Yeah, initiative doesn't matter anyway.
You still get as many actions as anybody else.
Yeah.
So he would always just take you first because, and I thought that
were pretty decent ones.
And I thought it was pretty. I thought it was pretty good. I think it's what's called you first.
I don't remember.
After you,
it sounds right.
After
It's one
you,
of those, yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
This site looks like it definitely can do it.
Okay. Well,
I don't know what diffusion means, but other than that, you could do a set of 7.
I'm just worried that the quality, Bob, is not going to be up to my Cheswick standards.
I don't think they are as the quality is as close to what you want.
You know me. I'm a very stickler for
I'd have to
dice.
see their dice in person. I don't own any.
Well, maybe we could order.
But they
a small.
look like they're engraved.
I would probably order a small set before we ordered a large
I mean,
set.
I can order some dice from them just because I like dice,
Oh,
and I'll just get a little
right,
7 set just or
Yep.
a D6 set so I can have more stuff for Warhammer.
Yeah. Fruitless Endeavor says tax equals quasi-mandatory thing that you feel obligated to take in order to remain competitive. Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. I guess, I think a tax is something that you feel like you must take this in order to even play the game.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, arguably, Pathfinder 2 is just the way it is right now.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else changes. You make a feat at general, and it's called, weapon focus, and it gives you a +1 untyped bonus to attack.
Everyone takes it.
That is not a feat tax,
Right.
in a sense, because you don't need that feat to play the game, but every single person would take that feat.
Yeah.
And so it may not be a tax, but it's so good it's mandatory.
Yeah.
And maybe you could view that as a tax.
It's like you don't have to own a cell phone, but everyone expects that you have a cell phone.
Correct. So yeah. Anyways, long story short is that I do think that there are elements of the game that I think that we would probably done differently. Maybe you would do differently. Let me know in the comments if you're not a member of our Patreon and you don't want to discuss this with us in person. Let us know like what you thought of the Ranger Remastered. Let us know what you thought of.
And like and subscribe to our channel.
Yeah, that's not as important.
If You know,
It is to YouTube.
if we were making a PF2 that was like PF2, I honestly think I would probably start with simplifying the fuck out of the game. I think there are far too many classes.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this a few times. I really like the archetype design.
Mm-hmm.
I would have way less classes, and those classes would do very core, distinct things that like were powerful in their own right, and they did that job really well. And you wouldn't have all this weird mingling, you know? Like, can you really tell me like the big differences between things like the witch and the oracle in like a substantial way?
Well, not just that. Any character class that relies on a primary progression.
Yeah.
Wizard, sorcerer, cleric, druid, witch, oracle. I'm forgetting one. Maybe
Druid?
I'm not.
Did you say druid?
I did say druid. Sorcerer.
No, you said sorcerer.
I think I said wizard.
You said wizard, sorcerer. I don't know.
My point is,
Got it.
those classes are all spell rank 1 through 10.
Yep.
Here's your progression.
Yep.
Here's your feats that you're not feats. So here's your features that increase your spell DC. And then the only thing fundamentally, I mean, there's a couple, I mean, yes, like, oh, sorcerer get 4 and is the repertoire, whatever. But the only thing that's fundamentally different between those guys is their feats, which is what archetype does.
Yep. Exactly. And I would move all the fluffy flavor stuff in the archetypes.
Yeah.
You know?
Then would you just say that everyone gets an archetype if they want? Like
Yeah.
it's like a free archetype.
Spice it in.
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost like you could have
Archetype
3
would
classes.
replace
You could have a
background or something.
warrior
Yeah.
class, an expert class, and a caster class,
I
and
like
then use
that
archetypes.
design. I know you're hot on that design. I like that design.
I'm
I
not
don't know
hot
if
on it.
I would
just,
go
I just think it sounds.
that far, but I'd be a lot
Oh,
closer to that
Bard
than
is the one you
20
forgot.
fucking classes.
Shark Boss.
Oh,
Yes,
Bard.
it does sound like Shadow of the Demon Lord because that is a great design. And
You guys just described Fantasy Age.
yeah, but the stunt die is weird, Damian Williams. Bard is the one I forgot.
Yeah,
Damn it.
Boothby, gotcha.
Damn it. Boothby.
You can always trust on Boothby.
I know.
He knows.
He's such a Pathfinder 2
Dr.
expert.
Metropolis coming in hot.
Wow, Dr. Metropolis. Thank you again.
4 classes: fighter, cleric, thief, wizard. Pick an archetype or respect within those, and cut way down on all these effing modifiers and trap options.
Yeah, that's Derek's like hot design.
Yeah.
And like to be fair, I mean I like it. I don't know if I'd go that far because part of me also likes the iconics. But like I said, it'd be a lot closer to that than what we have today.
Yeah, my only thing is, I question, I wonder about this myself. Why do we still have the cleric? What purpose does it serve? What is the cleric now?
The healer.
Well, no, because the
what it
cleric,
is.
Not even.
because the cleric was originally right a spellcaster who could also fight really
Yeah, be
well,
a frontliner.
right? Because they got
But that's
more
what the paladin is.
right, but then
But
it's
then
like
he's
so.
not a
Then so
spellcaster.
even in a world where now the cloister cleric, the default because of
Doesn't
Warfree,
even, they don't even get armor.
they don't even get armor,
Yeah.
you know. But yet somehow the cloister cleric still gets more hit points than the wizard or the sorcerer. Why? The cloistered cleric, the no armor wearing divine character, why do they get 8 hit points a level and the sorcerer and the wizard only get 6? Does that make any sense?
The reason I'm really excited for the remaster is not for the remaster, but for the things after it.
I have other things to say, but yes, continue.
Well, I'm actually this is related to what you're saying. I think the authors, I think they just felt trapped. I think they felt trapped by 50 years of history, and I think it shows in the designs. And listen, I don't always like Glorian lore. I don't always like the weird occult kind of stuff they have going on, but like it's theirs. It's unique, and so I'm hoping that as they move into the remaster and like have the freedom to explore this space, they have the opportunity to like define some lore that they're interested in versus being trapped by these old things. You look at the Ranger and the Crusader designs, and it looks like that they were held hostage. Like they're trying to appease all these people who had all these different class fantasies for this one class, while at the same time make something that's compelling. And it's too much. It's too much to do all at once. And I think that's why we are always so lukewarm with this stuff, right? And say what you will about the mechanics of The Alchemist, it's very clear what The Alchemist is trying to do.
So, we talk, I do have problems, some problems mechanically that they started to fix with The Alchemist.
And to be fair, a lot of those problems are just from the
what
playtest
the person was saying about the problem with the mechanics and the theme, I think the theme of The Alchemist is great.
It's very strong. They knew what they were trying to do because that was theirs.
That's true. Well, and this gets where I was going to say before. The other issue with the cleric is very much loaded into the idea of this Knights Templar.
Right.
It's very much loaded into sort of this Christian mythology, right? If you even look at what the cleric does and how the cleric operates, the reason why the cleric can only use simple weapons is because back in the original days, clerics could only use bludgeoning weapons because clerics couldn't shed blood, right? Because that was against their...
Bashing a skull open and getting gore everywhere, totally fine. Jesus is okay with that.
Well, that back then, the things didn't always make a lot of sense, But my point is
I
that
only use stones.
like
Stoning.
clerics were very much supposed to fill this sort of kind of quasi-Christian knight niche.
Yeah.
And the game is so much beyond that now.
Yeah.
Like I don't understand why this is still such an important element of the game. And then you look at the cleric now and you're like, oh, it's more of like a white mage.
The cloister, certainly.
The cloister cleric.
Yeah.
So you're like, so why, but...
The war priest is an interesting concept because it's this Gish kind of character, which could be fun. PF2 doesn't have a lot of that. But, I mean, for reasons we won't get into, like the war priest out of the book fails in many ways, right? It could have been cool, but now we've got all the way to the white mage,
right?
Which at this point, I don't know, play a divine sorcerer, like
it's very strange. I just don't understand. A divine sorcerer, and not to mention that when we come talking about the casters, anyways, the fact that so many of the casters can overlap what traditions they take, anyways,
yes,
means that the distinction between them is almost meaningless,
right? And then going back to your all spells ranked, right? Like there's like what 8 and 9 S tier spells.
Sure.
In the game. So like, if you're like a sorcerer and you're arcane, you take Crossbow Evolution and the other upgrade, like you're going to get like the majority of the best spells in the game. So it's easy for characters to get these access to these core spells. And it gets back to everyone being the same.
Right.
You go through all this effort and split out the traditions, and everyone just cherry picks what they want anyway.
Yeah, right.
This is 100% true.
That is 100% true. We got a super chat from Vin who says, FU, meaning Fabula Ultima, has an interesting take on
classes. Buddy.
Has an interesting take on classes, to be honest. SDL2.
Yeah, we actually love the
SDL?
F2 classes.
Shadows of the Demon Lord.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Shadow of the Demon Lord and Fabula Ultima both have sort of similar idea, where the idea of the class as this sort of monoatomic, this sort of like all-in capsulization of what this class is.
Which PF2 and 4E went in hard with.
Well, 4E went super hard in.
PF2 is doing the same thing.
I mean,
like you are your class.
You are your class.
Yeah.
You pick your lane, and you are in it.
Multi-classing in both editions is similar. Right?
Yeah.
You spend a feat, you get access.
I mean, case in point, when we played third edition, people multi-classed a lot.
Right.
Now, we didn't do a lot of like the stupid prestige class cheese and everything like that. But like we had a ton of people that were this and that or this and that and another thing. We had a lot of multi-class characters. In fourth edition, no one multi-classed, like ever.
Yeah. I can't remember.
People were very happy being in their lane. But I think part of the reason that they did that is because that in fourth edition, at least, D&D, your lane was so well prescribed because you had your role and you had your power source and you had these abilities that really just made you feel like, man, this makes me feel like a fighter.
And you were content to play
This
in
makes
your
me
lane.
feel like a warlord. And so you were very content to stay in your lane. You didn't try to, there was no like, you're like, man, I wish I could do this and that. You're like, no, I really like the thing that I do. And I want to keep doing it.
Reason.
And in like PF2, it's weird. Multi-classing is more of like just like, I don't know, making your character identical, right? Because like, what's your common multi-class? Oh, you're sorcerer, pick up crusader.
A champion. So
they're champions.
Yeah, everyone picks.
Yeah, pick up champion and get your armor proficiencies and all that, right? Like how many of you in Dark Winter had champion? All of you?
I did. Bob. I was a fighter,
right?
You
were fine.
Who went champion?
Oh, you still picked it up.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah, all the reactions are amazing.
Well, no, because I was a fighter with charisma, and then I multi-classed, or I took archetype into sorcerer, occult.
Yeah,
because I wanted heal, or I didn't get heal, but I got soothe, I got heroism, I got heal, or haste.
Fighter,
and
by the way.
I was a fighter, and then Bob was a sorcerer.
I took champion,
and he took champion. So we both had champion's reaction.
Yeah, and I know George at one point
and this was like pre-nerf. This was like pre-nerf. When like whatever that one feat that the champions get or the fighters get, that like now it says it has to be used only for like attack of opportunity or something like that. So we could have like multiple champions reactions. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah.
It's
also pretty common. A lot of people do that. So
we got
John O says clerics are centrally tied to religion in your game, and both WotC and Paizo insist on removing its religious ties. But that's the class.
Yeah, but not only that, the word cleric.
Yeah.
When you use that word in real life, when I say cleric, what do you think of? You think of a Muslim. You think of like a Muslim leader,
I think of clerics,
or you think
like
of
clothing.
Yeah. So, or you have like the idea of the Christian sort of knight.
I think the Christian one.
Yeah.
That's just because we're.
But that's my point. Like, so
Yeah.
it's very much a religious concept and class, and it's very crazy. So Damien with $2 says, now you have to do more remastered videos. Well, thank you, Damien. You're saving the channel. Because if not for those super chat goals, I would probably just keep doing videos on stuff that absolutely nobody wants to watch, and that I'm excited to talk about.
Except for 20 people. There's 20 people out there.
Yeah, no, there's probably 20 or 30 people here. You know,
We got actually a lot watching right now.
You know, we've talked about this a lot, where we've said, you know, this channel has this kind of interesting dilemma, right? Where, you know, a lot of people come to us because, and they stay with us and they become patrons with us because they become infected with our love for so many different games, and they become, you know, in some cases they stop playing 5th edition, they stop playing Pathfinder 2nd edition because they become so much more enamored of, I'm playing Blades in the Dark now, or I'm playing, you know, some other different game, which is great. But the problem is the reason people find us in the first place is because, you know, most people are out there playing D&D or Pathfinder 2nd edition. So there's sort of a weird sort of tension between like talking about Pathfinder 2nd edition, but also then talking about the things that a lot of people end up coming to us and sort of, you know, sort of learning and finding about. By the way, I think it dropped today.
What?
My guest appearance over on.
Did it actually drop?
I don't know yet. Oh, maybe I shouldn't say it, but I thought it did. All right, never mind. I'll be quiet.
The thing I watched today?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It might have dropped.
I thought he said it was dropping this week, but maybe
I didn't see it posted. I went through your link.
Okay. Well, I'll just say this: make sure this week you pay extra special close attention to the Rules Lawyer channel, because he's going to be dropping a video that I was a part of on a collab. So that'll be kind of
Rich
cool.
is even watching right now.
Oh my God,
That's
we love
Valdo
Rich.
in the chat.
We love Rich so much. You know, but if Jim Scott says no one but me is interested in saving the channel in general.
He says for the low monthly fee, I can keep 3 people
Jim
hostage.
Scott, that is true, because we're not even interested in saving it. If we're being honest.
That's what he wrote. For a low monthly fee, I can keep 3 people hostage. He keeps you us here.
Yeah, pretty much.
It keeps us here. You know, but you know, we have fun doing this and everything like that. But you know, again, you know, let us know. I mean, what kind of things do you like to see from us? I mean, obviously, our take on Pathfinder 2nd edition is not always the most popular opinion out there, but again,
it is our opinion.
It is our opinion. You can't take that away from me. And but it's also, you know, again, I'm not trying to belittle anybody, but we have a much broader set of experiences than a lot of people who might be playing this game. And so, you know, I'm viewing it maybe through a very critical eye, but that's just because, number one, we've been playing these games for so long, and number two, because we've seen so much of else what's out there, you know, and that you know, I don't necessarily know that you know, what's the difference between a professional expertise versus an opinion, just a simple preference. But I do like to think that, you know, there's a little bit more that goes into this than just us shooting off at the mouth. You know, it's a weighed and measured approach.
Well, and also, if we're wrong, you know, call us out. We're happy to be educated.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I would rather to be wrong in my opinions and find out that like things are actually totally awesome and sweet than to be right, honestly. Because days that we're right are actually really shitty days. Because it's like, man, this sucks.
Yeah.
Oh, we're right. Oh man, it sucks.
And that's the other thing, you know, that we try to do on this channel is we try to encourage you to think about the games that you're playing critically and think about them constructively and think about them with an eye towards, is this giving me all the experience that I want, you know, that I expecting out of this game?
And I would say that opened my eyes a lot as I was playing, because when I started playing D&D 5e and Pathfinder 2, I'm just like, let's go, fucking hype. And I'm just going in this rail, and then hype. And then Derik and Smith are like, well, you know, what, this is failing or this is not working the way you want it to. And I have to pull myself back and start thinking about it and go, actually, yeah, I wanted to be doing this sort of thing. So I actually think I'd be having more fun doing this than that. And you don't do it unless you pull yourself back and kind of get other outside opinions, I think, too. Because then I would have been just focusing on the barbarian's the coolest thing since sliced bread.
Even the entire time you're like, why am I so miserable?
That's what I'm saying. And then you realize, like, oh, play the 5e barbarian. You're like, oh, this is really cool. This is so much cooler. But you play other games and you start to learn other cool things.
To be clear, and I want to reiterate this, the reason you had so much fun playing your 5e barbarian is because in DTX we had the resilience system and you were able to
cool.
use that to empower your rages, which you were not only able to make into super rages, but also could use your rage multiple times per day.
So all you're doing is reiterating the point of there's other things out there that are so much cooler. So,
Yeah, I mean,
yourself back and
obviously,
understand.
obviously, what makes something game cool to you might be very different, which is totally fair.
Yeah.
That's why I'll never say that you won't enjoy a game.
Yeah.
I might say I don't enjoy it, and I'll try to explain to you why I don't enjoy it and why you might not enjoy it.
well, first of all, you told me I would not enjoy The Alchemist, and that was true. But you told me that.
He knows you a bit better. Yeah,
He was
generally
like, this is
speaking,
going to happen, Bob. You're just going to want to be a fighter.
Derek's not going to tell the audience that they're not going to have fun with something.
Yes.
Yeah.
He might say, this type of person won't have fun with this.
Right. So again, and I do agree that there's something for everybody. But Damien says I want to see the spell update reviewed. Fuck you, because that to me is the biggest fundamental change. To
This is
the
the one
rules.
just came out 2 weeks ago. I was talking about the remastered spell update. Not your spell rankings.
I thought he was saying
no.
I thought he was saying do all spells reviewed again.
No, he's talking about the one that came out 2 weeks ago is the biggest fundamental change for the remastered.
How's that?
I haven't read it. That's what I'm saying. It came out 2 weeks ago. I linked it to our chat.
I didn't think they were changing that much.
Well, that's what he said. I didn't read it, so I don't know.
I don't know. I question
Do
whether
I trust things I read on the internet? I don't know.
I question whether that's the biggest fundamental change to the rules or not.
That's hard because there's so many in this edition that's totally not getting updated to a new edition.
Right. Dr. Metropolis, on the other hand, says we should do a 220 part series on 4E role and power source breakdowns. He says, make it happen. Fruitless Endeavor says, I'd watch it.
That's a great way to get me to hate that system. Listen, 4E is a great game.
all powers ranked.
It's well designed. There are some stinker powers out there.
Yeah, 4E design definitely had what I would like to call ivory tower design.
100%.
Where they were like, this power is bad,
Yeah.
and a good player will never take it.
Yeah. No, that's true.
So you know who's the bad player when they take it?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a real thing. It was more so in third edition. It was Monty Cook's
Well,
big
because-
thing, but
bec-
like
yeah, that
fourth
was Monty-
edition, it kind of prevailed.
Like that was part of the allure of third edition D&D for some people.
Yeah, you can make bad choices.
You could make bad choices, which meant that as a character, you could sit there and pat yourself on the back and say, I'm a better player than you.
or go read a what's
Because-
his name? Tree.
Treant monster,
Someone
Yeah.
doesn't take Twin Strike. You just knew.
Um,
Damien says they got rid of proficiency to spell lists and made it just spell proficiency, making so many different choices viable.
Interesting. So,
But actually, like the whole ivory tower thing is a big reason why like PF2, like, you don't really min max anymore. If you min max, it's because they fucked up and there's a bug in the game. Like all the choices are mostly horizontal in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because that was a big thing that people from PF1 wanted fixed in PF2 is like there was too much of a gap between new players and pro players.
Mm-hmm.
You still have that to some degree with things like armor and attribute choice. Like there's two decisions at the beginning of the game you can make that kind of fuck you over. But like if you're actually playing the game the way the game tells you to play it, moderates and severes, you're still fine. It's not a huge deal. But like there's no like it's so hard to fuck up a character in PF2. You have to go out of your way. And even then, like...
No, Derek says just remove half the stuff and you're still fine.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to pick feats. Your chassis is going to carry you through the game as designed,
well, and that's where the concept comes in, where it being like these choices are mostly thematic.
Yeah.
They're
cinematic.
not, cinematic. Bruno says competitive RPGs, and it's like, it couldn't be further from the truth. So it's on one hand, you have all these build options, but on one other hand, they've never mattered less,
There'd be something to be said about competitive in the tactical play, but even then, like, people praise PF2 for being a tactical game, but compared to like a Warhammer or 4E.
So Damien's saying you're not proficient in primal spells, you're proficient in spells.
Oh, I heard they were changing that. Yeah.
So does that mean that I can use wisdom to cast arcane? That I can use
I don't think they changed that.
charisma to cast
I think what he's saying is
divine?
like for example, my character in your campaign, that's a bad example because actually I use intelligence and wisdom and I have the same proficiency. But let's say like you have someone who like was a wizard and they multi-class and they're like, I don't know, cleric, and they picked up divine.
Yeah.
Those are progressed at two separate progressions
Right.
in core.
Right.
Or fuck, core, such a stupid name. The first release of Pathfinder 2. In the second release of Pathfinder 2, you now just have spell proficiency.
Sure.
So, if you are a legendary spellcaster, you're now just a legendary spellcaster.
Interesting. But how do you
still
determine
use the
what
proper ability scores? But if you're a master in spells, you're a master in both lists.
Yes.
Right, but how do you know what stat to use? Is it
That's
based
got
on?
to be off your class.
Probably.
Yeah, but what if I'm picking up a different class, a spell list?
I assume it has to be your base class, right?
So, like, if I'm a sorcerer and I'm a legendary sorcerer, a legendary spell proficiency, obviously I use charisma for my classes. But when I pick up which archetype, what do I use? Int? Intelligence?
I haven't actually read the article yet.
Yeah.
So,
But they want us to do that one. So if we want to do any more Remastered, we also
You
can
still need wisdom for cleric spells and charisma for bard spells.
okay.
So I guess however you get access to it.
Yeah. So I mean, the biggest difference there is that before you could only through the multi-class feats, you could only get to master, and now at level
I
19,
did read this. I just forgot.
at level 19, you can be a legendary.
That's right.
I mean, okay.
Like, okay, they simplify. I get why they're doing it. I actually, and I know I'm the minority.
Now the spell descriptions are even more inconsequential.
I thought it was cool that you progressed separately in your different traditions. It made the traditions somewhat.
Yeah, traditions are meaningless now.
They are completely meaningless.
Yeah. What did in chat, Bob? What did someone say
What
about
do you guys think of the new meta of rushing to get all your focus points? In my honest opinion, if everyone is going to rush to 3, why not make it so all spellcasting classes just get 3 focus
That's
points?
gonna be
all
the evolution.
spellcasting classes should just get 3 focus points?
That will be the evolution.
That
That'll be in the not next version.
That
of
is
Pathfinder.
absolutely correct. That is what they should do.
That's guitar guy Nick. Says
Yeah.
that.
Well, guitar guy Nick, you are smart.
And then we'll take it a step further and be like, well, this is too much power at lower levels, but appropriate power at higher levels. So then we'll just have an encounter.
Actually, I will say this. I still think it was, I was very critical of it, but I still think that it's too restrictive. But if I were to redo Pathfinder 2, I would be more inclined to do something like the Summoner or the Magus, where you only have a handful of spell slots at your highest couple levels, and then have focus spells and cantrips.
Oh.
And I think
So that's your low end and then your high end?
no, I just think that I would change the game around so that you rely mostly on focus spells.
Yeah.
Okay.
And basically make it an encounter
Yeah.
power based game.
4 with extra steps.
Yeah, just 4E with extra steps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because then, like, your highest slots are your
And
dailies.
rituals, Boothby says.
Yes, yeah, of course,
Sure.
yeah. Well, actually, I mean, we're always influenced by the games that we play and read. I guess we did play. I love Fabula Ultima's approach to spells and rituals.
Yeah.
In that you're still spells. They're still like, there's like a dozen or so or 14 per spellcasting class, which means potentially it's very easy to pick up multiple classes, obviously. So you could be in a scenario where you end up having 12, 15 spells, but they're very discreet.
Yeah.
They're very specific.
Very fast.
They're very fast. And then all the rest of the
Yeah.
all the like the
Distracted away in
weird stuff that's very vague and narrative and very non-combative in nature, they just put into the ritual.
Yeah, that's not really a Pathfinder thing.
I know. It could be, but
I cannot see the core developers doing that.
my
I can
laptop
see third party.
my laptop died, but I know somebody today, I think it was Luis Loza on Twitter today, released they were like, I finally did it. I made Pathfinder 2 light and fit it on a single page.
Nice.
And one of the things that they basically said was all spellcasting becomes narrative rituals. And
I feel like that gets too close to the 5th edition market for them, right?
well, yeah, obviously they're not going to like seriously publish it.
Sure,
I'm just saying
yeah.
the person's point was you could do Pathfinder 2 on a page.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, again, remember like your spell reviews. So many of those spells could have been rituals anyway.
Right.
Like,
but there's just a certain
they're so overly specific. Like, why does this?
because
take up
there's a
great
certain
space?
type of player that really enjoys being able to take that, and this is something we
100%.
and
These are
write
people who play PF2.
and write it down on their sheet and say, I have this thing.
Right.
That's
why. That's why I'm saying, like, I don't think people go for the narrative.
And
thing.
on a less cool note, there are people who go, man, if I didn't have a list of all these things, and you just said you can do whatever you want, I wouldn't be able to think of anything.
That's true.
So the lists and all the spells help them be like, oh, because I would be creatively bankrupt otherwise, and I would never be able to think of something cool.
Yeah.
And
That's a very common thing.
again, I'm not trying to like poop on anybody too much here, but when we were playing Fabula Ultima, at the end, we kind of described how the Dark Crystal's energy had been unleashed and whatever, and your character, the warrior, the prince of the kingdom of light, destiny, whatever, you were like, I'm going to try to rebind the dark energy back and reseal the breach. Right. And they're like, obviously there's no spell for that. So use a ritual system. And I'm pretty honest when I say, I don't think a lot of people who play role-playing games these days would even think like that.
No, this is what they do. They go, I don't have that ability.
Right. Like I don't have I didn't take the seal dark crystal breach spell.
I've done that. I know exactly how that would be. I would look at my sheet and go, I got nothing here.
I guess I got to beat it and fight it in combat.
And this happens a lot when me and Smith play PBTA. Like I look at my sheet and I'm like, I can't do anything. And Smith's like, I got this idea. And then it goes, I'm like, that's actually pretty cool. And let's do that. Like it's because of that kind of stuff.
Pretty sure terrorism was not on my character sheet.
Loth says, losing the trope of spellcasters being super strong, but Nova feels better for game flow, but odd too. Marshals are less powerful, but can keep going and having more and more spellcasters keep going. The problem with that, Loth, is nobody plays like that anymore. Yeah. The old idea that spellcasters had this limited sort of set of resources and the martial characters did not, it got undermined because that's just not the way that adventure paths are written. It's not the way that most people play anymore, So I think that I mean, I'm not trying to say 4th edition is perfect, but 4th edition basically said, look, at this point, the distinction between martial and spellcaster is kind of meaningless, And
also, by the way, if you want to make a game system that works for APs, which is what, these guys want to do, like you don't want the spellcasting system. And I think it does. It holds them back in their design, Yeah. It holds them back in the APs, right? Having these classes that have to sleep and rest, right? Well, it screws up the cinematic tension of like reading the diary from the boss you just killed and quickly running off to the next adventure without taking a moment to rest, because if you rest, the entire game falls apart, Like, just be a kineticist from now on.
Yeah. Kineticists are wild. Yeah, if there was any distinction about the martial spellcasting gap, and you're like, wow, but then explain the kineticist to me, because the kineticist can do all of these things, if not every round, every other round with overflow.
Right. Oh yeah.
And it's not like it's minor shit.
Oh, it's awesome stuff. I felt awesome.
Yeah. Well, that's a 4th edition class written by a 4th edition guy put into PF2.
Right. That was written by Logan Bonner. Yeah. Logan Bonner was a 4E guy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And someone was asleep or / they were like, we're promoting your Logan. I don't know. Something happened where Logan got away with writing that book, right? And it's awesome. And I don't know how it slipped out, right?
That's so funny.
Hopefully he can sneak a few more out.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think that'll do it for tonight. Yeah. So again,
we're locked in for another remastered.
We're locked in for another remaster video, so maybe we'll get to that next week or in the next couple of weeks' time. And of course, November, I think, is when the actual Core 1 comes out. And we'll have
I don't know when in November
10 or something of the classes, right?
We'll probably do more videos also with these previews probably popping out. And then we'll really get into this stuff.
I'm sure Paizo's going to have a whole
once stuff comes out, we'll be.
I mean, again, for as much as we talk about the game, I think we would be very much. I think people will want to know what our opinions are of these remasters and like get our sense of how has this shifted.
I also get a better feel.
I'd love to go back and do like our tier rating that we did for the classes, and then see where did things get better or better. Because what I'd love to see is things moving in towards the middle.
Somehow the witch got lower.
Honestly, from what I've seen right now, the witch could be moving
there's
lower.
There's not a lot of hope out there.
I mean, it was already an F,
sad.
But
I want the witch to be good.
I mean, and then that's also where we start to getting into the conversation of like, well, if we were creating Pathfinder 3 or if we were in charge of the remaster, what would we have done with the witch? And have some interesting ideas. So
that's right.
Bob, anything else?
No, I'm excited for when it comes out, when Remaster comes out. I want to look at it because I like PF2 and I'd like it to be better. But I'm also excited for a lot of other stuff we're doing. So,
all right, sweet. Smith?
So it's kind of funny because I thought at first this was going to be like a DTX stream. So like I went.
This is what I'm excited for right here.
I wrote a book, and
on his way home, just jogging.
Like, made it, added tables and all that. But, for those of you who are interested in DTX, fuck you. We're going to talk about the Pathfinder 2 Remastered Ranger instead.
By the way, I just like to point out that, by the way, like, Smith was like, hey, I was thinking about our Dungeon Time Extreme game, and I wrote some stuff down.
Yeah, just jotted them down.
I just jotted down some notes, and then he shows up today with like a spiral brown bound printed book.
I literally made this today, like including like the format and all that. Like I took it from Notepad and actually like wrote it out and made it.
People are gonna try to screen capture.
Yeah. So, needless to say, something that we have been kind of talking about and throwing around the idea of, and Smith has been a big proponent of, is taking some of our ideas, games that we've played, and trying to make them a little bit more presentable, cleaned up. Many of our patrons have really enjoyed playing Dark Winter, which was a campaign that Aaron ran with a lot of custom rules for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. That became available to our patrons as part of their Patreon subscription. And of course, last year we played a 5th edition campaign that I heavily house ruled, and we kind of made up a bunch of crazy rules along the way. And so we're kind of experimenting with that and kind of trying to play around with that a little bit. So again, really, it's all in the.
We're always tinkering.
We're just always tinkering. Whatever game kind of.
But now with the channel, it's like we actually have an ability to, and should have the ability to put that stuff into words, like
right?
Things that you and Smith come up with that are so clever or creative. We should be putting that stuff.
Well,
down.
to be clear,
it's funny. Like
it would take me like 17 years to make what Aaron writes on the way home. I'm like, wait, were you driving a car while you were writing this?
Sometimes, yeah. I get a lot of red lights. Very
this idea was at the light.
Yeah. But the funny thing is like you've done this for years. Like when I do a home campaign, like the channel's existed for 2.5-3 years now.
Yeah.
Like when I do a home game, like this is like the minimum.
That's
right?
table contents.
Oh yeah. If it was Aaron's actual home game, not for anybody else to ever see, he would have sent it to a publisher and gotten it hardbound.
This
book.
happened.
I have hardbound.
Don't you have like mugs too?
Oh, I had a bag of swag for everyone.
I've got mugs. I've got hoodies. I've got T-shirts.
My wife still wears the shirt for the campaign. It was a whole thing.
So I missed this.
Oh yeah,
I came in too late.
You missed all the swag, Bob.
Dude, it was like literally thousands of dollars just to show up to the session to make characters, right? I mean, it's funny, right? So like the difference now is that there's people, and like some of them might care for some reason and want this, right? And so that we'd be like, okay, I guess here, have a thing,
yeah.
But like we just do this. Anyway.
George said one campaign had a binder for your character sheet.
That's right. You showed up. You got a binder, which contained it was a thick thing with all the systems.
Yeah. That had like custom art and layouts. Actually, I remember Kendall. I had him help me with that. We probably spent a week working on that.
Regardless, say Smith likes to write, and he does a very good job writing, and so he's jotted down some ideas that we're going to start to play around with.
Yeah. So, anyways,
so you like DTX?
Yeah, DTX. So again, look forward to talking to you about more games this week. Tomorrow, Thursday, I think we're gonna be. I gotta decide what I'm gonna do. I owe you guys
one of those streams.
Well, I owe you guys a first look. I owe you guys a Pathfinder 2 equipment, magical item stream. And then Sunday we're gonna be talking about Mithras, which is a sort of a old school variant, sort of updated from the old RuneQuest game, which I am not very familiar with, but I'm going to have some guests on. We're going to have Donnie.
That's always the game system you would never let me buy at conventions.
What, Mithras?
No, RuneQuest.
Oh, RuneQuest,
Because I would go to pick it up, and you'd be like, you don't want that.
So it's funny. They came out with a new edition. I have the RuneQuest. I bought the Pendragon.
Yeah,
which uses RuneQuest or uses Basic Fantasy.
I think I might have pen.
But they came out with a new box set of it at Gen Con, so I picked that up, and it would technically be my first purchase of that system. But Donnie is really excited about Mithras, and so me, him, and Ben are going to do a Sunday system stream about it, where Ben has a pretty reasonably working good knowledge, Donnie a little bit, and me nothing. So it's kind of a nice little spectrum of information there.
Cool.
Beowulf says, I need to get Smith hooked on Genesis so he can write cool shit for it.
Genesis.
Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3rd Edition. The one with all the dice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we played it.
I actually like that edition.
Yeah. I mean,
I heard people hated it.
They do. Oh, they really hated it.
I had fun with it.
Like that.
I like dice.
I like dice too.
Yeah.
And I like
Fantasy Flight.
I like custom dice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool. I remember I had it's been so many years now. I had the red dice for like rage and the green dice for something else.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, no, yeah. So when you were an aggressive,
stances.
when you were aggressive, you used red dice.
Yeah.
And when you were passive or more defensive, you used the green dice. That's right.
Yeah, you could switch between them to build up your pools and then do a thing. And then each one had like I think like you got fucked up more on the red dice and
Yeah, there were less defensive symbols and all this other stuff. Yeah, so
it was cool though. All right, I don't know. I like that stuff.
Very tactical.
Also, we like Fantasy Flight L5R game, which apparently everyone else hates too. So.
Exactly. Well, like even Matt Colville, which he's creating his own variation of a game, and basically originally they were basically using descent dice. For like they were using like dice that had like this is how much damage it does, but then you have like the surges
and hearts,
right?
And all that
and
stuff.
so then
so much more efficient.
And so then like the way that you would build your character is you're like, oh, what kind of dice pool do I want to have? Do I want to have these dice? Oh, I could add this dice to my pool with this type of weapon. It does a lot of damage, but maybe not a lot of surges.
It sounds complicated, but it was really easy in Descent. It was super clean.
Right. So
yeah, I like that a lot. I've actually,
but they decided not to do it because everybody was like, "Fuck you, we hate proprietary dice."
Yeah,
and everyone hates proprietary dice.
Proprietary dice are awesome,
and I think proprietary dice are awesome.
I will say this: I've actually been reading Colville's new book, and I like it a lot.
What book is that?
Flea Mortals.
Oh, the monster book.
The monster book. It's basically 4E monsters in 5th edition, but he did a good job because it's still clearly 5th edition, so it's not like it doesn't feel like a hack or a homebrew. It feels like you could have literally bought this book, right? And I like Matt. He obviously does a lot of good stuff, and he has good shows and stuff, but like. His Stronghold book really turned me off. It was really the prose. I didn't like it. This book is a lot better because it has less of that.
Well, it's a monster book.
It's a monster book, and also I think he's got a lot more writers now, which is great. So he can kind of put his designs out, and other people can kind of just get to the point. But I will say one thing. You and I were kind of talking about this to some degree, and it's related to the dice. The book is laid out in a way that it's clearly meant to be used at the table. And you haven't looked at it yet, but like lots of similarities to the 4th edition spreads, right? Where like they pack in, like you got your lore and art on one page, and then they pack in the stat blocks. So if you're running an orc encounter and you got your controllers and soldiers and artillery, like you got a spread, you're good to go. You run as many orcs as you want. No flipping, no spell lookups. It's great.
I do love that.
I suspect, and I haven't looked at a lot of his stuff, but I get the feel just from his design and their approach that they are actually focused on the game master being a fish at the table, the game being easy to play at the table. And so things like that spread kind of speak to that. And things like the dice, the custom dice speak to that because, what does that do, right? Like in L5R, you roll that dice, you get so much information all at once.
Yes.
Right? Did I succeed? How well did I succeed? Are there opportunities? Are there any complications? Things like that. Like in one roll, you can resolve like 4 different things, which you just can't do with a numeric system. You just can't, right?
Yeah, there's lots of like even just with like what's the strife? Like it's like okay, how much do I want to take? Like there's lots of decision making.
Yeah, and that's the other too. It's so rich
in
choices and decisions. And I'm sure this would be similar to that, right? So it speaks to it because one of my biggest issues with PF2, and this is intentional. They flat out come out and said this, right? I think it was Jason. I'm not sure. I don't want to misquote anyone, but like the PF2 books are written to be read. This includes the V series. This includes the APs.
Not to be referenced.
Not to be referenced.
Yeah.
They are designed because like a lot of people who buy these books are buying it to like enjoy it. Like not quite literally as a novel, but basically as like, I'm going to read this book. The Lost Omen books are absolutely almost like a novel, more like a historical like recounting, right? But like, they're good quality, they're good art and all that. They look beautiful, but like when you actually try to use them at the table, it's a horrible experience. Like zombies being like a perfect example, right? The zombie stats are split across 2 pages. And you're like, what the hell is going on here? I'm trying to run it. Now they probably just assume everyone's going to open up a laptop and play the game that way, But listen, I bought this book and I want to use it, and I would appreciate if you thought about your game masters at the table, right?
Right. Well, and this is where too I've always said like. My personal pet peeve is that they write role-playing game books written for the person who's never played a role-playing game and they're picking it up for the first time. It's like that should be what your beginning box set is for.
That's right.
And the main rule book, the one that your customers are going to be using for
2 does not need
the games that people are going to be using for 3, 5, 6 years. Let's assume for a moment that if they're going to be playing the game for 3 or 5 years, that the book probably is better served by being addressed at the advanced user rather than the neophyte or the newbie. So.
Yep. Agreed.
All right. Well. Thanks a lot, everybody, for hanging out with us tonight. We'll be back Thursday.
Yep.
Next week, we'll be back here. We're going to have a patron coming all the way from Australia, Vin, the self-confessed cynic. He's going to be here. He's going to join us on next Thursday, in the studio. So these guys will be back then, and we'll be talking more about role-playing games and Pathfinder 2 and D&D, DTX, Fabula Ultima.
Oh yeah.
Fate, 4th edition D&D.
Vin likes chaos.
Yeah. Well, Vin did say during the stream that he took a look at. He's been reading more 4th edition. He's like, there's parts I like, but I still don't like it.
Oh, that's a big step for Ben.
No, Vin.
Oh, Vin. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's still a big step, but
yeah, that's a big step for Vin.
Yeah.
Well, I thought you said Ben, and I was like, really?
No.
He hates Power Fantasy.
Vin. No.
I could see Ben liking 4E because so many people hate it.
Ben said today that he's been running his 1st edition AD&D campaign for like 2 months, and he's run I don't even know how many sessions, but no one has still left the first hex. That is a Ben thing to say. So that is very much for Ben. All right, that is going to do it for us. We will definitely see you this Thursday. Could maybe join us Sunday for Mythros if you're interested in that. And otherwise, we'll see you next week. And we'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Bye, everybody. Peace.
Peace.